Chapter 551. Fairness Denied. Just as Reptar was going to chomp down onto the unguarded Rena, a rustling bush echoed out into the forest and alerted them of an incoming individual. They looked cautious, wondering if a certain curly blonde woman had finally found them and was about to hunt them down. They looked at the shoes and saw that it was far too small for Bo to wear. And as this person finally revealed themselves, they realized that they got half of their guess right. The person was blonde, but it wasn't Bo. It was Michael. When Rena looked up and saw him, her heart stopped. Why is he here? She had been fighting Reptar and Erlos exactly so that Michael could run away from them in time. Did he not hear them fighting? Instead, he came here right where they wanted him. Why? She muttered out in defeat, thinking that everything she did was for nothing. Michael looked at her. You asked for help. I'm here, he said with a natural tone, as if it was the normal thing to do in this situation. Rena and others couldn't believe what they heard. He was also going to suffer a defeat just because Rena asked for help? It didn't make sense at all. You shouldn't have come here, Michael, said Erlos. We were going to hunt you down, but seeing as how much Rena wanted to protect you, we wanted to at least honor her wishes and let you continue with the game a little bit longer. Michael shrugged. It's fine. I'm not just here to help Rena. I'm here to avenge her. Seeing the confidence and bravado that Michael said those words, Reptar, Erlos, and the other people watching from above were stunned into silence. Just to let you know, I am in the 5th stage of body formation, and Erlos is in the 4th stage, warned Reptar. He was trying to tell Michael that just their individual strengths alone would be enough to defeat him. And once they worked together, then he would most probably become exactly like Rena in the end. They could have stood a chance if they had fought together from the start, but now, Rena was completely out of the game. She didn't have her mithril relic weapons, nor her ability red dust. If he wanted to fight them, then it was already too late. Everyone thought this was obvious. But from Michael's confidence, it seemed that he didn't believe them. After all, he didn't say he was going to escape, or that he was going to escape with Rena. He said that he was going to avenge her, meaning that he would defeat both of them in the same fashion that they defeated Rena. I can't believe you said that. Now my pride won't allow me to let you go, said Reptar as he slapped his gauntlets together, with the giant crocodile above him roaring in anticipation. Wait, Reptar. He's just a kid. Maybe he doesn't even know what he's talking about. Let's just let him go, said Erlos. Michael shook his head. Nope. Come on. Let's fight. Me versus the two of you. Reptar and Erlos looked at each other, not knowing what to do. They knew that this was just a game, and that there was nothing personal in it, but this was a challenge that they couldn't pass up. Their pride was on the line. You can't blame us if we go hard on you, warned Reptar. You asked for it. I'll step away for now. Let you have a fair fight, suggested Erlos. Nope. You didn't give that same courtesy to Rena. Why? It's because you respect her strength. You see her as someone that you need to defeat. Does that mean that you think you can defeat me just by yourselves? Michael asked, a bit offended. At this point, Erlos and Reptar didn't know what to do. They were giving Michael all the excuses he could have, but he just wouldn't accept it. They just didn't know why he was that confident. They sensed his fight against Rena a while back, and from their estimation, he was also in the 4th stage of body formation. If he was in the 6th stage, then they would have accepted his confidence. But he wasn't. In fact, I'll let you guys have the first strike. You're Erlos, right? You use your whip on me and drag me in towards Reptar. What is Michael thinking? Why didn't he just run away? Not only does he want to fight the two of them at the same time, but he also wants to give them the first strike. Is he crazy? Does he want to get out of the game? He can just say surrender and he'll be escorted out of the pocket dimension safely. I just don't understand. Reptar's crunch ability will work on anyone that is below the 5th stage. There's nothing that it can't crush. Literally. Everyone was rooting for Michael, but all of his decisions at this point seemed like he was purposefully sabotaging himself. Reptar and Erlos were even gracious enough to fight him one-on-one. But no, he chose to fight them together. Unfortunately, no matter how much they screamed, Michael and the others wouldn't be able to hear them. So, when Reptar began to position his gauntlets like that of a crocodile's jaws, they braced themselves for a quick defeat. Erlos began swinging his whip around, with the skeletal alligator skull slithering like a snake above him. Finally, he cracked it towards Michael. The whip elongated just enough to reach his whips and wrap around him tightly. The image of the elongated nose of the alligator manifested around the rope, as if it had Michael locked in its jaws. With a single tug, Michael was pulled forwards with enough force to make him fly a few feet above the ground. His hands were still caught under the whip, making it that much harder to escape the whip's grip. Just a mere 10 meters away from him was Reptar, who had his gauntlets ready to chomp on his body and crush his bones. As he continued to fly into their trap willingly, the audience above were biting their nails with worry. Even though Michael was already on the halfway mark, there was still a carefree look on his face and no indication that he was actually trying to break free. He's not moving? He's not moving. Why isn't he panicking? Does he think that Reptar's gauntlets are a joke? I don't think he's planning on attacking at all. As Michael reached the threshold of Reptar's ability, the giant crocodile diva manifested itself around the gauntlets and readied itself for a meal. Not even a blink of an eye later, the jaws closed in on Michael with a force and speed unexplainable to physical and magical terms. Everyone closed their eyes, not wanting to see the brutality that was about to unfold. But a few seconds later, nothing happened. The sound of bones breaking and flesh shredding was nowhere to be heard. They finally opened their eyes, only to see an impossibility in front of them. The crocodile's teeth were just a few inches away from Michael's body, but it stopped there as if frozen in time. Chapter 552. Switch. What? A mixture of what's, how's, and impossibles rang out from the crowd. It was as if they were looking at a frozen screen, with all of the players paused for an eternity. Erlos was stunned into silence, unbelieving of what had happened. He was staring at Reptar, who was stuck in place, with his expression frozen at the moment when he activated his ability and chomped down at his prey. He was so shocked that even his diva couldn't help but copy his movements. The alligator jaws slightly opened, as if shocked just as well as Erlos. The whip turned loose, allowing Michael to free himself from its grasp. Now that he was free, he grabbed onto the whip and pulled as hard as he could at Erlos. Still in a state of shock and unable to understand what has happened, Erlos got forcefully tugged towards Michael. And as Michael used an air spell to propel him outwards, Erlos got pulled in even more, with his feet already off the ground and traveling just as fast as Michael. Because he was so used to being the one to pull other people towards him, Erlos completely forgot to let go of the whip itself and got taken directly where Michael wanted him to be. And when Erlos finally came to his senses, he realized that he was already directly in the jaws of Reptar's gauntlets, with its teeth bearing down above and below him. Before he knew it, they just exchanged positions. He was now the one in trouble of being crunched by the crocodile's jaws. He quickly used his whip and cracked it towards the nearest tree, hoping to pull himself off of this dangerous situation. But it was at that moment that a click resounded throughout the silent forest. Reptar turned unfrozen and his gauntlets continued on towards its original trajectory. The crocodile diva chomped on its target, with the satisfying feeling of bone and flesh being crushed with stupendous amounts of force. Ah! Erlos screamed. His entire left stomach was directly in the gauntlet's jaws. He wasn't able to escape fast enough. Ha 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 ha! This is the power of my crocodile, Michael, Reptar bragged, with the high of a successful hunt still lingering in his mind. Clap, clap, clap. Michael leaned on a tree to the side and applauded Reptar's ability with genuine praise. That's pretty good. I can see how nobody will be able to get away from that unscathed, he said to Reptar. Finally, Reptar noticed Michael in front of him. Confusion filled his face, wondering how he came out uninjured from the crocodile's jaws so fast. Was it a clone that he ate? Ah! Let go of me, you buffoon. Reptar looked down and realized that it wasn't Michael who was in his jaws, but Erlos. He quickly retracted his gauntlets, letting Erlos fall to the ground, bleeding from the giant gator bite mark on his left stomach. What happened? In his perspective, everything had happened instantaneously. At the moment when he activated his ability, Michael was the one in his jaws. Yet, when he completed his crunch, it was suddenly Erlos who he had bitten. It was then that he felt something fall out of his arms. The iron switch that had been attached to him dropped to the ground and rolled a bunch of times before it came to a stop. He didn't know what it was, but he knew that this was none other than Michael's power. His ability. The two glowing, metallic arms above his head proved it. "That's your diva," Reptar groaned. Erlos, holding his injured torso, got up and looked at Michael's strange ability. He had used it to stop Reptar's body entirely, as if he was frozen in time. A time-stop power, that was for certain. But the thing that other people still couldn't believe was that it was somehow able to overpower Reptar's diva even though they were one stage apart. The crowd, including the other major factions watching this, were perplexed. "That shouldn't work," said Bobby as he leaned forward. His eyes locked on the iron switch Michael used. Reptar's diva should have asserted its dominance over a weaker diva. Dickie could only nod. "That's also what happened the last time that I saw Michael fight. He was able to defeat someone one stage above him." Every single magnetic in the crowd, even the ones at the very top, were left wondering how Michael was able to do what he did, with the normal folk even more confused. "That metal thing is his ability, right? I didn't even see him use it." His hands were clearly tied up by the whip. "I can swear that I didn't see his arm move even once. I think I saw it. There was a blur at the moment it happened, as if that metal block was shot out from a far distance." Meanwhile, Reptar didn't care one bit about how Michael was able to do what he did. What only mattered was his defeat. Wishing to right what he did wrong, Reptar raised his gauntlet jaws and chomped at it towards Michael. And in an instant, Reptar disappeared and reappeared right in front of Michael. He literally crunched the space between them and instantly nullified their distance. Reptar opened his gauntlet jaws again to crush Michael, but that momentary reload of his ability allowed Michael to jump away at the very last second. "TSK. Erlos, can you fight?" Reptar looked back. Erlos gritted his teeth before using his hands to clamp on the injury in his stomach. A figure of the skeletal long-nosed alligator appeared in his fist and bit down onto the injury. In an instant, his wounds stopped bleeding. This was one of the good things about his ability. It allowed him to minimize blood loss. "I can handle it," Erlos said. "My Godforge protected me from your bite, but at the cost of my stamina." Erlos gripped his whip and snapped it towards Michael. The rope elongated to try and catch him, but Michael conjured a solid earth ball and used it as his defense. The whip smashed through the earth ball and continued on its path towards Michael, but he already disappeared. Both of them looked up, eager to catch Michael. But then, they saw something they never thought they'd see. Michael summoned not one, not two, not four, but 8 magic circles in the sky, all of which were glowing with their own colors. 8-element mastery? Both of them screamed out. In fact, it seemed that the entire auction crowd shouted the same exact thing when they saw Michael conjure up those magic circles. The only one that wasn't surprised was the Tower Master. "So it was true," he muttered. "That Cerberus bastard wasn't exaggerating a single bit when he talked about Michael. This kind of talent in the mystic arts was unprecedented. They thought it was tremendously overpowered for Michael to control 4 elements. But 8? That was way too unfair. Who is this kid anyway? Why haven't I heard of him before? Has he always had this mastery? And the fact that he can conjure up 8 magic circles means that his mana pool must be incredibly big." Chapter 553. Magic Animals. Each of the magic circles in the sky correspond to an element. From the water spell, Michael conjured a huge blob of water that slowly morphed into the shape of a hippopotamus. As for the fire spell, he conjured up a ball of flames that transformed into the shape of a tiger. For the earth spell, he chose a snake. And for the air spell, an eagle formed out from solid wind. Each one of those animals could be considered predators of a crocodile and an alligator. Their physiology was basically perfect to handle the 2 crocs he was fighting against. But of course, just having a single element wasn't enough. With the other 4 magic circles, he created pure elements that shot towards a specific animal. The hippo was imbued with the element poison. Its watery figure soon turned into violet sludge, allowing it to form a toxin that would poison anyone it touched. The tiger was positioned low, as if it was about to pounce on its target. But once it was added with the dark element, its body soon began to blend into the shade and darkness that the trees provided. As for the eagle, it was added with the light element. Its feathers began to ruffle, before a few of them dropped out of its wings. As they slowly glided down, they slowly turned into a miniature eagle with the same magic intensity as the original. Last but not least, the snake was imbued with the lightning element. Electricity crackled around its slithery body, allowing it to lunge at speeds that would rival that of thunderbolt. All 4 of these animals floated in the sky surrounding Michael. They all looked down at their prey, their bodies beginning to showcase some of their new powers. Reptar eyed the tiger with purpose. It was as if he saw a worthy adversary in the animal. He leapt into the air, converging onto the tiger. As his gauntlets clamped down onto the tiger, it suddenly disappeared into a black mist and got away from his grasp. Reptar chomped on the air and suddenly disappeared. When he reappeared, he was back on the ground, right next to the tiger who had hidden itself within the shade. He punched towards the tiger right in its nose, with the animal recoiling from the power and losing some of the darkness element it had. With another punch, he sent the tiger flying upwards, where it would eventually come back down and land directly into his crocodile gauntlet's jaws. Just then, Reptar felt the ground shake behind him as he saw the violet sludge hippo charging at him at insanely fast speeds. He jumped up and vaulted over the hippo. The animal skidded in the ground, trying to stop its momentum and turn around. But Reptar immediately charged forward and used his gauntlets to chomp at the hippo's backside. At this moment, the shadow tiger lunged at him from the side and bit his gauntlets. The tiger's shadow fangs tried to gnaw its way into the weapon, but despite its weathered condition, the mithril relic was still strong enough to withstand the bite. Reptar's body began to glow as he used his ability. The image of his crocodile appeared onto his fist and was biting down onto the tiger. And as he rotated his wrist with speed and power, his gauntlets suddenly turned into a rotating shaft that sped up to nearly 1,000 revolutions per second. His crocodile was doing the death roll maneuver. The shadowy tiger, despite being made out of the 2 intangible elements of shadow and fire, were immediately turned into pure mana as it got shredded into near oblivion. Reptar smiled, having conquered one of his predators. But then, he felt a tremendous force pick him up from his torso. The hippopotamus had grabbed onto him with its eyes filled with vengeance for its comrade. It charged at the nearest tree, hoping to bash Reptar's head into it. Reptar felt the weakness in his body as the poison from the hippo began to seep into his skin. The toxicity gave him a temporary weakness that allowed the hippo to slam his body into the tree, turning it into a million splinters. But instead of getting hurt, Reptar became even angrier. He raised his hands together, forming the jaws of his crocodile diva. And in one swift movement, he slammed his gauntlets together and crushed the hippo into a violet splatter. The force was enough to destroy the spell into pure matter, turning into nothingness. Meanwhile, on the other side of the battlefield, Erlos grabbed his whip as one giant eagle and 4 mini-eagles haunted him from the sky. He ignored the pain in his abdomen and whipped one of the mini-eagles, snatching it from the air and bringing it back down into the ground with immense force. With another snap, he snatched another baby eagle from the skies and slammed it into a tree. And just as he was about to do it a 3rd time, the big eagle swooped in and intercepted the whip's head. The skeletal alligator clamped into the bird before Erlos dragged it down with force. But instead of catching the entire eagle, they were only able to pluck a few feathers out from its skin. Erlos destroyed the few feathers he got, but some of them got away and turned into more mini-eagles for him to deal with. Wary of this ability from the eagles, Erlos decided to target the eagle's head, where its feathers were at its thinnest. It was at that moment when electricity crackled and the electric snake pounced on Erlos' neck. Since the earth element was charged with lightning, The snake's speed gave Erlos no chance to dodge the surprise attack. The snake was able to pierce through his skin and deliver air into his bloodstream. This would give him an air embolism that was just as deadly as poison. Erlos grabbed the snake from his neck and clamped his hands onto its body. The skeletal long-nosed alligator manifested in his fingers just before he slammed the snake onto the ground, pinning it down permanently. It wouldn't be able to get out no matter how fast it was. The snake crackled with electricity and wind picked up like a tornado, but no matter what it did, it wouldn't be able to overpower an ability. Erlos then grabbed the snake bite on his neck, clamping onto the air that he had been injected with and pulling it out of his body safely. Just then, the eagles finally found their moment and dived down into Erlos. Their wings created wind crescents behind them, and just as the moment when they were only a few inches away from him, they turned their wings and aimed the wind crescents at him. Erlos felt 20 wind crescents enter his body, cutting his skin and letting blood spurt out. Annoyed, he began to snap his whip continuously, and with each snap, a baby eagle would be snatched up and destroyed instantly from the very physics of the whip itself. After all, the end of a whip was so fast that it would surpass the speed of sound and create a supersonic shockwave. Chapter 554. Shots. Just as Erlos thought he'd had the upper hand, the air eagle shrugged its body so intensely that it essentially shed off all of its feathers in one go. And from those feathers, thousands of baby eagles were born. Each one was as vicious as the one before it. All thousands of eagles swooped down into Erlos and targeted his entire body. None of his skin was left untouched as they all created their masterpiece of work that turned Erlos into a red canvas. The original now bald eagle was even more intelligent than the others and targeted the injury on Erlos' stomach. Cock! Erlos groaned, feeling the intense pain shooting up his body as the eagle pecked at the bite mark on his stomach. Enraged, he swung his whip with speed and intensity. With each revolution, his velocity was getting faster and faster until it sounded like he turned into a helicopter. Using his ability, his skeletal alligator clamped down onto the very air in the environment and began to twist them along with the rotation of the whip. It wasn't long before wind picked up even more, allowing Erlos to create a tornado that picked up anything and everything in the surroundings. Not even trees were exempted from this force. The thousands of eagles tried to fly their way out of the tornado, but the current was simply too fast for them to overcome. They eventually got pulled back into the storm, forced to go with the flow of the tornado. This was the same for the bald eagle as well. It flailed its wings, trying to gather the air mana in the air for its own use, but unfortunately, the skeletal alligator from Erlos' whip snatched every single air mana in the environment. Even if it was a master of the sky, it was still unable to fight against the unreasonable power of an ability. On every layer of the tornado, Erlos' multiple skeletal alligators went in different directions, turning the entire thing into a giant blender that tore up anything unfortunate enough to get picked up. Feathers were turned into powdery paste. Mana was turned into pure energy. Everything was blended into a smooth texture. Erlos slowed his whip, eventually turning the tornado into a simple breeze. None of the eagles survived. Still, Erlos didn't come out unscathed. His whole body was covered in scratches, and his bite injury only worsened because of the bald eagle. He could barely stand up straight now because of how there was always a stinging pain that shoots up his entire body. To let off his steam, he slammed his foot onto the restrained snake in the ground, destroying it in one go. Once Erlos and Reptar dispatched of Michael's magic animals, it was now their turn to attack him. Erlos wrapped his whip onto Reptar's waist before using force to rotate his body around in the air like a ragdoll. This unorthodox method ended up allowing Reptar to reach speeds he wouldn't be able to reach by himself. And once he had gathered enough momentum, Erlos released the grip of his skeletal alligator and tossed Reptar towards Michael at insane speeds. With his gauntlets ready to bite down, he reached towards Michael and waited until he crossed the threshold. And to make sure he wouldn't be able to run away, Erlos shot his whip towards Michael and grabbed onto him with his ability. Now, he can't use his immense mystical powers to get away. A magic circle appeared in front of Michael, conjuring a lion made out of fire and lightning, creating plasma. Reptar chomped down on the king of the jungle, destroying it with ease. It seemed as if no matter what kind of animal he used or what kind of element he paired it with, anything would be destroyed in front of Reptar's crocodile jaws. Everyone thought it would finally be over for Michael. That was Michael's only chance. He caught them off guard, but it just wasn't enough. Now they're thoroughly prepared for him. They no longer treat him as a kid, so now they're unapologetic in their union of power. Those two's abilities work together so well. Nobody would stand a chance against them if they turned serious. See how quickly they locked him down when they started working together. But it was just then that Michael raised his hand and simply pointed at Reptar. A bright white light shined on the tip of his finger as it gathered power through a single point. Reptar didn't know what he was doing, but he had a bad feeling about it from the start. He opened his gauntlet jaws even wider, hoping to bite on Michael before he finished whatever he was trying to do. He couldn't back away now, especially since Michael had nowhere else to go. And just as he was about to chomp down on Michael's finger, the beam arrived. A single, unity gun fired off from his finger and hit Reptar directly in the chest. Numbness was the only thing Reptar could feel, but a few seconds later, the pain suddenly shot through his entire body, making him squirm. He looked down and saw a hole in his chest, which was smaller than a fingernail. Blood was pulsating out of his body and slowly staining his cowboy attire red. If it wasn't for the Godforge pieces in his heart deflecting the bullet away from his heart, then he would have been dead by now. Arg! Blood dripped out of Reptar's mouth, which he wiped off immediately. Despite the pain, he knew that this was his chance to finally bite down on Michael. Whatever he did had to have needed more time to replenish. This meant that he'd still be able to finish the fight as long as Michael was stuck in front of him with no way to escape. Ignoring the piercing pain in his chest, he raised his trembling hands and created his crocodile's jaws. But it was at this moment that he saw the whip's grip loosening on Michael's waist. "No!" he muttered out, lunging at Michael and quickly trying to bite him once and for all. But at the very last second, Michael's body turned into a shadow and disappeared completely from his view. "No!" Reptar shouted in anger. Not only was he in deep pain from being shot in the chest, but he was also getting frustrated that Michael kept escaping from his grasp every single time. He immediately looked down and complained to Erlos about his sloppy work. "Why didn't you keep him steady?" But as he looked at Erlos, he saw that the man's chest was also bleeding just like his. Erlos was in deep pain, so much so that he couldn't even hold on to his whip anymore. This vulnerability was what allowed Michael to escape from Reptar's grasp. "You're hit too," Reptar realized. But how could that happen? He only saw Michael use one of those light things that hit him. He didn't have time to shoot down towards Erlos either. Even the eagle-eyed spectators from the crowd were unable to pinpoint that moment when Michael shot off two of those bright lights. Again with that, how does Michael keep on shooting stuff without any one of us seeing it? Just then, a buzzing sound echoed through the forest. Chapter 555. Flying Metal Monster. The hovering object glowed as it gathered power in its barrel. And a moment later, the brightness peaked and released a tremendous amount of unity energy towards Erlos. He tried to get away, cracking his whip towards the nearest tree and jumping away. But unfortunately for him, he didn't come out unscathed as the drones. Unity gun shot off towards his leg and induced a temporary limp in his walk. After a successful hit, the drone flew away directly towards Michael, hovering in place just above his shoulders. Finally, everyone set their sights upon a metallic flying object. It was unlike anything they had ever seen before. Some even thought that it was a monster that somehow barged into their fight. That thing used the same spell that Michael used. So that's how he did that. What is it? Is it his tamed monster made out of metal? Or is it another one of his magical constructs? While the rest of the crowd were wondering about the drone, the Tower Master and the rest of the senior wizards of the Magic Tower were in complete disarray once they saw the Unity gun that Michael used. As eternal students of the mystic arts, they immediately recognized the power of all 8 elements inside the Unity beam. This was substantiated by the fact that they had just seen Michael command all of the 8 elements at ease. "Tower Master, What is that beam? How could all 8 elements be able to coexist in the same space without creating a tremendous explosion? And I know he has an 8-element mastery, but his finger or his entire body should have been destroyed as soon as he used that beam. They all looked at the Tower Master, the most senior and most learned among them. But even he was completely clueless. Why are you all acting like we are experts in the physics of 8-element spells? We didn't even think this was possible in the first place. But Michael must have had his whole life to create and innovate new solutions that would make the impossible into the possible. There was curiosity in the Tower Master's face, completely enamored by the Unity gun. We can get that, Tower Master. But how about that hovering object? How is it able to create a completely identical beam? Are we to assume that it also has an 8-element mastery? Not only that, but from what I can see, the metal object doesn't use any external magic to make itself fly. Tell me you can see something different, Tower Master. Unfortunately for them, the Tower Master had no answer for them. Its capabilities of flight are rooted in simple physics. We can see that the air is being displaced below it, allowing it to fly. As for how he was able to figure out the mechanics of how to do that, I am none the wiser. And as for its abilities to also use the beam, I am as clueless as you are. The wizards of the Magic Tower were not the only ones that were interested in Michael's Unity beam and his drone. Alaric couldn't help but lean forward as he observed the progression of the battle. That beam is extremely powerful, he realized. It's fast and it's enough to damage the natural defenses of the Godforge pieces in the heart. He saw how Reptar and Erlos barely had any time to react once that beam was shot. And even if they did anticipate it, they would find it hard to defend against it and come out unscathed. That alone makes Michael a terrifying opponent. But then, his eyes moved over to the hovering drone beside Michael. Its shape and its abilities were completely foreign to him. But in the end, that didn't matter. The only thing that Alaric took notice of was that it was moving as Michael willed it to. That flying metal monster of his, if it can also produce that terrifying beam, then he has essentially nullified Reptar and Erlos' numerical advantage. As surprising as it sounded, Alaric was now giving Michael a 50% chance of victory against those two. If he said this to himself a few minutes ago, he would have thought himself crazy. Reptar moved down and helped Erlos get back up to his feet. The two were injured and bleeding. In comparison, Michael barely had a scratch on his body. The progression of this fight was unlike anything they expected. "Do you know what that is?" Reptar whispered to Erlos.
No.
"But it's the one that hit me in the chest. I'm sure of it," Erlos replied, massaging his wound. They both looked at Michael and the drone hovering next to him. The mystery behind that metal object was just as threatening as the man himself. Their eyes were now wary of the bright white light that would appear in Michael's finger. Once they saw that familiar glow, they would know to immediately run away. "We can still win this," Erlos said. "You attack him while I keep an eye on that thing of his. It'll be easy to destroy it once his attention is on you." Reptar nodded and fixed his cowboy hat. Now that he knew what to expect, he was sure that they could finally back Michael into a corner. He lunged towards Michael, his hands open in a tiger stance. 2 miniature crocodile heads appeared on his gauntlets, with both having their jaws open and ready to bite. While he did that, Erlos focused on the drone. He cracked his whip towards the hovering metal and intended to catch it with his skeletal alligator. However, the pain from his injuries flared up and ended up making him flinch. The whip missed and hit one of the tree's branches instead. Because of this, the drone was free to adjust its barrel and aim it at Reptar. A bright white light emerged from the drone, getting Reptar's attention. He quickly stopped in his tracks, skidding in the ground. Michael used this opportunity to create 2 magic circles at the same time. 2 magical koi fish, one made from light and poison mana and the other made out of dark and lightning. Both swam through the air and mirrored each other's actions before rushing towards Reptar. Reptar gritted his teeth and grabbed both koi fish with his gauntlets. The crocodile in his hands roared into action, twirling their bodies and creating their signature death roll. The koi fishes were shredded into pure energy. But it did its job. Reptar had no time to move out of the drone's line of sight and was just mere moments away from being hit. Just then, Erlo's whip cracked towards Reptar and wrapped around his waist. The drone's gun shot towards Reptar's body, but not before Erlo's yanked him backwards and saved him from another bullet hole in the chest. But just when they thought that they were finally safe, they saw a bright white light on the corner of their eyes. They turned around, only to see Michael's finger glowing with the power of unity, just a few moments away from firing it. Chapter 556. Collision. Reptar and Erlos felt their hairs standing up on end after seeing the unity gun pointed at them. They both used their respective abilities to protect themselves. Erlos snapped his whip in front of him, with the whip's head stopping directly in the air. His skeletal alligator clamped not on the air, but on reality itself. And with a simple tug, he bent the space in front of him, allowing him to also bend the straight beam of light that would come towards him. On the other hand, Reptar used both hands to crunch the space around him, allowing him to teleport directly behind Michael to ambush him right after he finished casting his unity gun. Their strong abilities and their fast thinking allowed them to immediately come up with counters for Michael's beam, even though they'd only seen it a few times. However, the threat of the unity gun made them forget one simple thing. That wasn't just Michael's power. Erlos thought he was protected from the unity gun, but unbeknownst to him, the drone had already positioned itself above him. By the time he heard that buzzing sound from the propellers, it was already too late. He looked up, only to see a small block of iron dropping from the drone and landing into his arm. Click! Michael's switch turned off his ability for a brief second. And that was all that was needed for reality to unbend itself from Erlo's grasp. The unity gun in Michael's hands shot off. And in that same moment, Erlos finally broke free from the freezing effect of Michael's ability. Erlos woke up just at the moment when the unity beam hit his torso. "Kurgich," he groaned, falling to his knees. Meanwhile, Reptar disappeared from his place and reappeared behind Michael. And in the moment Michael fired off his unity gun, he made his move. Reptar reared his arm back and punched Michael in the back of his head. The crocodile in his gauntlets had its jaws open wide, ready to perform another death claw that would literally shred anything into pieces. Just when he thought he'd gotten Michael once and for all, an invisible prismatic shield manifested above Michael's head and fought against Reptar's crocodile. The gauntlets clashed with the shield, creating sparks made out of mana. Eventually, the power of Reptar's diva overpowered the unity defense and tore through it for the first time. The gauntlets pushed through towards Michael's back, but with its power and speed significantly reduced. The tips of Reptar's fingers brushed with Michael's clothes, tearing it into shreds. However, Michael finally recovered from shooting the unity gun. His body quickly turned into a shadowy gas that escaped further injury from Reptar's gauntlets. Reptar stumbled forwards, his balance broken by his miss. He fell, staring into the ground with a shocked and confused expression in his face. His crocodile should have torn through anything it touched. It was the rules of his ability. However, Michael's defensive shield was still able to withstand his gauntlets for a few moments. It may have only lasted for a brief second, but the fact that it was able to defend against an ability should have been impossible in the first place. While he was stunned, Michael conjured a magic circle beneath his feet. A giant fist made out of magma shot up and performed an uppercut on Reptar's entire body, flinging him up into the air. Since the spell was made out of fire and earth, those elements got imbued into his body. And right at the peak of his trajectory, Michael created another giant fist, this time made out of air and water. The second fist punched Reptar back into the ground, imbuing him with air and water mana. The combination of all those four elements created a mini explosion that blasted Reptar back into the ground with tremendous force and power. Reptar smashed into the ground, with his body skidding through soil, rock, and trees before eventually colliding with Erlos. The two of them crashed into a giant boulder, cracking it into half. Meanwhile, Michael reappeared in the air and felt the wind on his back. Reptar was still able to graze him in the end, creating a large gash near his shoulder blades like he had just been in a motorcycle accident that shredded his back. Thankfully, though, it was only skin deep. Despite being injured, Michael felt very good about himself. Fighting against these two made him use his powers a lot more efficiently than before. He felt like he was improving. It was at that moment that a sound echoed around him. He quickly turned around, wanting to discern where it came from. This time, he was sure that the sound didn't come from anywhere but his own head. What the? Am I hearing things again? He would have thought this was a coincidence, but this was the second time this happened. ChatJK4, is that you? Negative. I do not detect any sound noise in your environment. While Michael was occupied with this mysterious noise that he kept on hearing, Reptar and Erlos were trying to recuperate from their wounds. Ha! I can't hold on much longer, Erlos said, barely able to stand on his own. Each time he tried, the pain would make him fall down. I hate to admit it, but I'm nearing my limit too. My crocodile requires a lot of power to operate, and I've already used most of them in empty bites. Reptar looked at Michael and saw the boy still full of energy. If this goes on any longer, he's going to win. We have to do something drastic. Erlos looked at Reptar. He knew what he meant. Are you sure? We can only use it once. Look, I know we decided to use it on Bo, but we won't be able to fight her if we don't win against Michael now. Either we do this, or we're out, Reptar argued. In the end, they both agreed that this was a do-or-die situation. With that last bit of strength they had, they stood up and faced Michael together. They stood up and manifested their diva. Erlo's skeletal long-nosed alligator head appeared, its teeth perfectly molded for catching things. Reptar's giant crocodile head manifested as well, with its mouth opened and ready to shred things into pieces. They closed their eyes, gathering the power in their Godforge pieces to manifest more into the world. The images of their diva started to become bigger, fiercer, and overall became a lot more realistic. And then, something strange happened. Their two divas started to bend and deform in nonsensical directions. The weird part was that both divas were contorting in the same exact way as each other. Suddenly, a visible grayish, white aura appeared around Erlos and Reptar. It slowly rose up before enveloping their diva as well. As they concentrated more and more, this aura grew bigger and bigger until they started to overlap each other. And once the auras overlapped each other, it morphed into one single flare of aura that encased them both. Suddenly, their two divas flew out of their respective positions and dove towards each other with speed and certainty. And upon collision, a shock wave of disturbance echoed outwards and brought everything to a standstill. Chapter 557. Synergize. Once the shock wave dissipated, everything settled down. But things weren't the same as before. Above Erlos and Reptar, there was a figure of a giant crocodile, with skeletal armor that wrapped around its head and modified its teeth to become even sharper and even more lethal than before. The two divas, the skeletal alligator and the giant crocodile, had now merged together into one amalgamation of each other's essences. Everyone couldn't believe their eyes. No way! Did they just successfully synergize with each other? That's impossible. They're not even crew members, let alone friends. They shouldn't be able to cooperate with each other with enough connection that their divas agreed to coexist with one another. It could also be that their divas are naturally synergistic with one another. We can see that their obolites fit well with each other. Everyone knew that synergies, a technique where two magnetics bond their divas together to mix their strengths together, was incredibly hard to do. One would practically have to spend 10 years working together at least, before they could synergize with each other. I thought they would lose to Michael, but with this synergy, they're bound to win, literally. Who knew they had this technique in secret? They were probably saving it up to fight against Bo, but ended up using it for Michael. They might have lost their numerical advantage, but now their strength is far above Michael's. The skeleton armor-wearing crocodile opened its jaws wide before snapping it with force and intimidation. Reptar and Erlos opened their eyes at the same time. One can see it in their expressions that they were getting ready for their final push. They were going to put all of their power into this last attack. They moved in sync as if they were acting as the same person. They charged towards Michael with their weapons ready to strike. And as they charged towards Michael, the Synergy Diva above them charged with them. The aura they gathered was powering the Diva and allowing it to interact with the real world, with its gigantic body pushing through the trees and destroying the crowns. I didn't know combining divas was possible, Michael thought. He then raised his hand and powered up the Unity gun in his finger. He closed one of his eyes and aimed directly at Erlos. Beside him, his drone adjusted its barrel and aimed at the other half of the Synergy, Reptar. They fired the shot within a second, with the beam of Unity shining towards the two at near instantaneous speeds. Just then, the aura surrounding the Synergy Diva flared up and fought against the Unity beam crossing the barrier, slowing it down and weakening its power. The skeleton-armored crocodile uttered a guttural roar, using its synergy to give their respective owners more power. Reptar, with his empowered gauntlets, caught the Unity beam with his hands and crushed it entirely, breaking the beam. Erlos snapped the whip towards the beam, cutting it from the source. For the first time, they defended against the Unity gun. With this renewed vigor, they charged forwards. Their Synergy Diva opened up its jaws wide and started swallowing everything in its path. Trees were getting shredded into a million splinters, and the soil of the earth was getting pulverized at the same instant that they got near the visible aura surrounding the synergistic duo. They left a wake of a destroyed mess behind them, with Michael right on their sights. Michael backed away using air propulsion at the soles of his feet. Unfortunately, the synergistic diva seemed to be eating up the space in between them just as fast as he was running away. He then conjured up 8 magic circles. 4 animals jumped out, each having 2 elements that synergized well with each other. A hippo, an eagle, a tiger, and a snake lunged towards the giant skeleton armor crocodile. Individually, they clashed into the synergy's oppressive aura but were unable to pass through. But with Michael's intervention, the mana particles left behind by the animals connected with each other, creating a mixture of all 8 elements. And without the proper control and system that Michael imbued in them, the mixture quickly turned volatile, exploding into a giant discharge that would create a massive crater. But the giant Synergy Diva simply closed down its jaws and swallowed the explosion whole, destroying it before it had a chance to destroy. Erlos and Reptar kept charging towards Michael, thinking that victory was within their grasp. Michael reached down deep into his pockets and took out all of the switches in his inventory. Each of his fingers clasped a switch in between them. He threw them towards the Synergy duo. The switches became firmly attached to the aura of the giant skeleton-armored crocodile. They turned on, briefly making the Erlos and Reptar pause in their steps. But it lasted only for an instant. The switches were forcibly flicked outwards by the aura and continued towards their target. As Michael flew away, he kept throwing switches after switches, with none of them lasting more than a small instant before they were completely overpowered. And in that moment, he felt that sound again. He didn't know why or how, but it was as if an idea was birthed into his head. It was like his instincts awakened a new idea. He stopped throwing switches and focused on controlling his drone. He willed it forward, taking the Synergy duo's charge head-on. Anyone and everyone who saw this were instantly baffled by his decision. Some couldn't even help but scream out towards Michael in the hopes that he would hear them. "What are you doing? Run away now. You already saw that nothing would stop the skeleton-armored crocodile from wreaking havoc. You won't be able to teleport away in time." In their minds, Michael was wasting his resources by throwing everything he had onto the diva. Synergy divas were a complete beast entirely. Their powers were way too large for him to overcome. However, despite their best efforts to persuade Michael, he remained steadfast in his decision. The drone hovered in the air, waiting for the Synergy Diva to reach it. And at the moment that the aura reached the drone, the skeleton-armored crocodile viciously brought down its upper jaws and chomped on its prey. Its reinforced teeth bit down onto the drone, hoping to destroy it into pieces. Sparks flew out as the crocodile met an equally strong force resisting its bite. Surprisingly, the drone survived the Synergy Diva's crunch. The drone continued to navigate through the field of aura, with the constant pressure of the Synergy Diva bearing down on it. Its flight was unsteady, tilting to the side and bobbing up and down uncontrollably. But aside from those, the drone looked to be in perfect shape, with no deformities whatsoever. Erlos and Reptar eyed the drone that was coming to them with fear and shock. They didn't think someone could break into their synergy so easily. The drone was clearly flying towards them, that they could be certain of. Both had the same idea at the same time. Reptar reared his fist backwards before launching a powerful punch towards the drone. At the same time, Erlos cracked his whip to the drone with tremendous force, meeting the gauntlets at its side. And after a moment, crack. Chapter 558. Mithril Weapon. Both weapons clashed with the drone, glowing with the power of a mithril relic. It wasn't long before the sound of cracking metal was heard echoing out into the forest. But as they looked at the drone, they realized that it wasn't the one getting destroyed. It was their weapons instead. Reptar's gauntlets were shattering from the knuckles and propagating outwards into the wrist. Light leaked out of the cracks, as if the power hidden inside it was slowly dissipating outside. The whip experienced the same breaking force. Its head exploded into a fray of individual threads, with the other knots in the whip following its eruption like a domino. It wasn't long before both mithril relic weapons reached the final point of failure. A sense of defeat and shock flashed over Erlos and Reptar's faces while their weapons glowed brightly. They couldn't believe that their trusted weapons would break at the very critical moment. Finally, their weapons exploded outwards with a blinding light, propagating a shockwave that sent the wind whistling in the forest. As the gust of air settled down, the only thing left in Erlos and Reptar's hands was dust. This was the only remnant they had for their mithril relics. With their weapons destroyed, their divas soon lost their only connection to the real world. The visible aura surrounding them powered down and slowly disappeared. The skeleton-armored crocodile twisted and deformed, before some sort of force ripped it apart in half and returned their individual divas to their respective owners. They both fell to their knees, completely defeated in body and in mind. The loss of their mithril relics was a huge blow, not just to their own egos, but to their hearts as well. They were their partners for a long time, and now it was gone with no way to get them back. They couldn't even grieve. Even at this point, they didn't know what happened. How could that metal object withstand the power of their synergy diva? How come it was their mithril relic weapons that were destroyed instead of it? So many questions were left in their mind, all of them unanswered. Meanwhile, in the auction room, the entirety of the crowd was plunged into silence. They had their jaws firmly dropped to the ground, still unable to process what had just happened. They were already sure that Erlos and Reptar would win because of their unexpected synergy. It was supposed to be a surefire victory on their side. But then, Michael went ahead and surprised them once more as his strange metal object flipped the entire situation around and destroyed two perfectly good mithril relic weapons into dust. How can that even happen? There's no way two weapons got destroyed after hitting a single metal object. Were they fractured from the start? Common sense dictated that mithril relics were the strongest weapons in the world, and two of them could break anything in half. So, it was either common sense was wrong, or that there was another explanation for what just happened. Wait, could it be that? I think so too. That flying object was a mithril weapon. It has to be. It's Michael's weapon. This realization sent the crowd gasping in shock. They couldn't even reconcile the idea of such a strange flying object to being classified in the same group as swords, axes, and spears. They just didn't fit together. However, this was the only explanation as to how it was able to withstand the power of the Synergy Diva and the two mithril relic weapons. Only mithril could damage other mithrils. While the majority were still unable to process this information, the major factions and some of the stronger companies were starting to entertain an even crazier possibility. Bobby was the first one to get it. As a descendant of the Hephaestus line, he studied the textbooks and the scrolls passed down from generation to generation, all the way back to the ancient times. They were being taught and molded to be the very best artisans and blacksmiths in the world. Their end goal as a family was to bring back the glory of the ancient humans. They wanted to bring back the golden age when mithril was the standard metal used in the world. Because of this, they studied mithril relics as much as they could. They observed how it was made, how it had deteriorated, and of course how it was before when it was originally made, back when it wasn't called a relic but an artifact. So, when Bobby saw the drone destroy 2 minimalware mithril relics with ease, he immediately became certain. That flying object is a mithril artifact, he gasped. The fact that it still remained unscathed after the collision proved his point even more. All of his other crew members were just as shocked as he was. They had never set their sights upon a genuine mithril artifact before, and one that was as strange as that. I knew the disparity between mithril relics and artifacts was big, but I never thought it would be to this extent. Facing against 2 mithril relics, it persevered. That's way too strong. How could it even fly? Is it a technological remnant from the ancient era? Meanwhile, on the other side of the VIP room, Kruger and the rest of his knights were also surprised by the appearance of the mithril artifact. The Order of the Heavenly Knights kept the most well-preserved mithril relics in the whole world. Kruger had seen multiple weird weapons in their collection, but never as weird as this flying weapon. He didn't even know how it functioned at all without the use of magic. There was just one thing on his mind. Where did he discover that flying mithril artifact? In fact, every single one from the major factions thought the same thing. But once the mystery and intrigue behind the drone died down a little bit, everyone started talking about Michael. The Wonder Boy, the mystic genius. No one expected him to come this far. But he disproved them yet again. First, he was able to defeat Rena in a fair battle. She was ranked dead last in the Rising Six, so many people weren't that yet impressed at Michael when he did that. But now they had nothing else to say. Reptar was ranked 3rd. Urlos was ranked 4th. And their ranking was when they were just by themselves. It didn't take into account their newly found strategy of synergizing with each other. Michael didn't just defeat them one-on-one. He defeated them at the same time, and in decisive fashion. He didn't crawl his way to victory. He had it in his hands the whole entire time. It became even more unbelievable for others to think that Michael was able to win against the 2 of them despite facing all odds against him. He came out with but a few scratches, while his opponents got their bodies beaten up and their weapons utterly destroyed. No matter what happens in this auction from tonight onwards, Michael would come out as a figure worthy to be at the top. As for his flying mithril artifact, it would come to be known as a terrifying weapon that even the major factions had to be wary of. Michael took a big breath of fresh air. Finally, he could relax for a little bit. For a second there, he thought he'd have to escape away into safety. But in the end, a surge of instinct led him to realize that his drone was far stronger than the mithril relics of his opponents. That sound, it's trying to tell me something, he realized. He looked down at his chest, peering through to the Godforge pieces in his heart. Was it you? He asked, but there was no answer. Despite winning against 2 very tough opponents, there was a sense of dissatisfaction left in Michael's mouth. It was as if he was on the verge of something, but he just couldn't tell what. Chapter 559, Amicable Talk. Rena looked at Michael with complete disbelief in her eyes. She felt like she was seeing a dream. He did it. He defeated them. Against all odds, he triumphed against 2 formidable fighters working together to defeat him. Even with their surprising synergy, Michael was still able to assert his victory over theirs. She realized now how foolish she had been all this time. She thought that Michael was foolish trying to take on the Rising Six all by himself. After all, she fought tooth and nail to get to the spot where she was now. But Michael proved beyond a reasonable doubt that he could contend with the best of them. She wouldn't have been able to defeat Urlos or Reptar by themselves. And together, she stood no chance even if she was in her peak condition. Yet Michael did it with his 8 elemental mastery, his mysterious time-stopping ability, and his strange, hovering metal weapon. All of those combined gave him power beyond anything she or anyone had ever seen before. Her father was right. Michael was much more powerful than she gave him credit for. Maybe he was right in other aspects as well. Daughter, catch his heart. Rena's cheeks turned beet red, with smoke almost coming out of her ears. She couldn't help but let her imagination run wild. She saw herself in a white gown, carrying 2 babies in her hands with hair as yellow as gold. And the one right by her side was a tall, dashing man with the same golden hair as her children. And once she looked closer at the man's face, she saw none other than, "What am I thinking?" she screamed under breath. She shook her head, trying to get rid of the thought, but it persisted in her mind like an endless painting. Meanwhile, Reptar plopped down on the ground, completely exhausted. "That was a mithril artifact, wasn't it?" "Yes, it is," Michael replied. Reptar tipped his cowboy hat in respect. "I hate to admit it, but you defeated us fair and square. Actually, it's not even fair since we ganged up on you." Erlos groaned as he picked off a long stem of grass and tied it on his wounds, keeping it from bleeding any further. "I guess it's our bad luck that we encountered you this early. Good fight, though. You sure gave us quite a beating." Despite the loss, both were very amicable towards Michael. Just like they said earlier in the fight, this was just a game and anything that happened within it was not personal. In fact, losing to Michael made them like him even more now. There was a sense of familiarity and friendliness that could only sprout once they had battled near death. "3 of us are down, meaning that there are 3 others left in the game. What are you planning on doing next?" Reptar asked Michael. In response, Michael shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe I'll wait it out until my teammates find a key." Reptar and Erlos disagreed with his current plan. Bo's crewmates are one of the best there is. They may not have abilities, but their fighting skills are top-notch. Not only that, but they are specifically trained for all sorts of situations, including finding hidden treasures in a location, Erlos said. "They'll find all the keys soon, if they haven't already." He was trying to say that Bo may very well be on her way towards the glass dome to claim the 5 drops of Sue hidden inside it. Michael had no time to wait. He had to strike. "You're pretty strong," Reptar admitted. "I think that you're even better than Fim, making you the 2nd best fighter in all of the Rising 6. I suggest that you find the other remaining players in the game and try to convince them to team up with you. That's the only way to make sure that Bo is eliminated before she can get the Sue drops." Both of them were rooting for Michael to win the auction now. That way, their defeat against him wouldn't be too humiliating. "Is Bo really that strong?" he asked them. Reptar and Erlos gravely nodded. "She's the top of the Rising 6 for a reason. It's not just the fact that she's at the 6th stage of body formation. It's also because of the way she uses her ability to dominate her opponents." Michael was a little bit concerned after hearing that. He knew he could defeat someone 1 stage above himself. But 2 stages? That would stretch the limit of what he could achieve. For a second, he considered their suggestion of teaming up with the other players to defeat Bo. However, this thought quickly died down. First of all, he wasn't that kind of person. He would much rather fight fairly and lose. Second of all, he wasn't that thrilled about cooperating with other people he didn't know about. It also meant that he would probably have to share the drops with them in the end. He might be called selfish for this, but he wanted all those 5 drops for himself. Just then, that familiar sound echoed throughout his mind again. His head twitched as he tried to listen to the sound more closely than before. He tried to discern what it was, but he still had no clue where it came from or what it meant. It was like he was trying to recall a word and becoming really close to remembering it to the point where it was on the tip of his tongue. But no matter how much he tried to think of it, he just couldn't remember it. This unsatisfying sensation frustrated him, to the point where his face was visibly scrunched. His weird behavior was quickly noticed by Reptar and Erlos. "What's wrong?" they asked him. Michael waved off their concern. "It's nothing. I just keep hearing this sound. At first, I thought it came from somewhere around me, but now, I feel like the sound comes from my own body." Reptar and Erlos both looked at each other. Their eyes signaled recognition. "You're hearing things?" Reptar asked. "What kind of sound is it?" "I don't know. It doesn't really sound like anything I know. It's kind of abstract, like a passing thought. But whenever I try to..." Erlos' eyes widened. "And this sound, does it give you a new thought? Like an instinct?" Michael nodded. "That's right. That's exactly what it is," he told them. Reptar and Erlos looked at Michael as if he had just told them that he didn't know what water sounded like. You don't know what that is? Reptar asked as if this was common knowledge. What is it? That's your diva communicating with you, Erlos exclaimed. This surprised Michael. They can talk. No, they can't talk, but they can communicate with you through nonverbal signals. This happens when the diva is trying to tell you something, when it is teaching you the power that it contains, Erlos explained. When divas do this, they are communicating to their user that they are on the brink of discovering a new power, a new ability. Chapter 560, Diva's Signals. Michael was surprised to learn that it was his diva communicating with him throughout this entire time, and it wasn't just trying to make small talk. It was giving him clues to a new ability power that he could awaken. So that's why I feel like I'm trying to understand something I can't remember. He was pleasantly surprised to learn this. If they hadn't told him about this, then he would have probably kept on ignoring his diva's signals and passing it off as background noise. That means that I can learn a new ability? Michael asked them. Yes. As you advance through the stages, you will start to awaken more and more of your diva's abilities. That's what the body formation realm is all about. It's about learning what your diva's true power is, and learning to control it, Reptar explained. But you must remember that it is also your limit. If you cannot understand or awaken the new ability that your diva is communicating with, then you won't be able to progress through the stages of the body formation realm. Even if you forcefully put all the Godforge pieces in your body, you won't be able to advance your cultivation. Your body will reject it and might cause you serious injury. Erlos and Reptar were very familiar with this rule because it was taught to them from the very beginning. They were told that cultivating a diva does not simply mean putting more Godforge pieces in your heart. It was about learning and understanding your diva. Many impatient and power-hungry individuals learned this lesson the hard way. They tried to put enough Godforge pieces in their heart to boost their cultivation from the first stage all the way to the 9th stage. In the end, their bodies turned into a pink mist as they couldn't handle the power and energy held by their diva. You're telling me that this is the first time that your diva communicated with you? Erlos asked, confused. Michael clearly already had an ability of his own. It was that iron block that somehow paused anything and everything's time and momentum completely still. So he should have heard the sound of his diva by now. This is the first time I'd heard an actual sound coming from my diva, Michael admitted. This made Erlos and Reptar even more surprised than when he showed that he had an 8 elemental mastery. They looked at Michael and started to reconsider their thoughts on him. After all, this meant only one thing. Michael's diva had yet to reach maturity. It was still undeveloped. But despite that, Michael's time-stopping ability was already able to overpower an ability that was one stage above his own. If his ability was already that powerful, then what kind of power would he awaken in the future? Erlos and Reptar didn't feel bad about being beaten by Michael now. In fact, they felt relieved they were out of the game. It sounded like Michael was on the verge of discovering his new ability. And if they had fought him for a little longer, then he could have awakened it and beaten them down even harder than before. How will I awaken my ability? He asked them. You fight, plain and simple. The more you use your diva and your ability, the more you'll be more familiar with its power. You'll find more progress if you fight with someone that is stronger than you, someone that will challenge your strength to the fullest. You have to be forced to your limits. That's the best way to awaken your abilities naturally. By being pushed to the limits, one's own natural instincts would take over. This would make it easy for someone to tap into the hidden power of the diva. Michael was a lot more excited now knowing that he was on the verge of a discovery. As long as he fought more, then he would eventually learn about this new ability that his diva was trying to tell him about. He couldn't help but look forward, towards the glass dome. By now, the rest of the players were probably advancing towards the center of the map trying to get into the Sudrops. And even though he didn't have his own keys yet, he already planned on going there right this very moment. Thanks for telling me all of this, he said to them. He was genuinely grateful. And after giving them a nod, he began walking forwards, with the glass dome directly in the horizon. Wait, are you not going to search for the other players? Reptar asked, trying to stop him. He shook his head. Nope. I'm going where the action is at. He used his supreme talent to see where the rest of the players were located in the pocket dimension. And surprisingly enough, he saw 3 distinct light mana signatures near the glass dome. And if he wasn't mistaken, it looked like the 3 of them were fighting. One of them was even showing an enormous amount of energy, one that eclipsed the 2. It was easy to guess what was happening. Bo was fighting against the last 2 players in the game. This made him want to get there as soon as possible. He didn't want to miss out on the opportunity of fighting against other strong magnetics for a chance to awaken his ability. You don't even have keys yet, Erlos pointed out. Michael smiled. It's okay. I trust my team. After that, he sped off forwards with his drone flying right beside him. Erlos and Reptar both stared at Michael's fading figure. What do you think? Do you think he can do it? Can he defeat Bo? Reptar asked. I don't know. If you had asked me that a few minutes ago, I would have said that Bo would still win against him in the end. But now, I don't know. This was the biggest compliment they could give Michael. The fact that they were even considering that he could win against Bo was unbelievable in the first place. Everyone knew that Bo was the strongest magnetic out of everyone here. It was a unanimous decision. But now, there could be some arguments to say that she was in danger of losing that spot. If not now, then possibly in the future. Michael's potential was through the roof. Just then, Erlos and Reptar saw a beam of light shine down on them from the skies. Their bodies started to shimmer in and out of existence. Now that they were out of the game, Barnaby was recalling them back to the auction. Despite losing, they were both excited to see everything that would happen in the game. Looks like we'll be spectators this time, Reptar said, chuckling to himself. That's not too bad. I want to see how this all plays out. Hey Rena, want to come with us and have a watch party for the game? They both looked to the side and saw Rena still holding her blushing cheeks and swaying side to side. She seemed to be scolding herself for something. Stop thinking about him, she muttered out loud. Reptar and Erlos both looked at each other. What's wrong with her? Chapter 561. Bo vs. 2. I can't get over how Michael was able to defeat them both at the same time. And did you see his strange mithril weapon? I want to see it in person. Wait, look over there. While everyone was still reeling over the events of what happened with Michael's fight, there was a completely new development taking place on the northern side of the map. Barnaby immediately got everyone's attention towards this new event. Ladies and gentlemen, it looks like that wasn't the last time we're going to see an interesting fight. Here we have the game favorite Bo going up against the other 2 of the Rising 6. 3 of the last 4 remaining players had gathered near the outer boundary separating the rest of the map to the glass dome. From a point of view above them, it looked like all 3 were involved in a Mexican standoff, where they were keeping each other at bay, preventing anyone from stepping any closer towards the glass dome. But in truth, 2 of them were actually working together to prevent one of them from advancing. That was none other than Bo Regod, the undisputed strongest player among the Rising 6. In front of her was Fim from Angelic Crafts and Tenzing from the Mountain Movers. Fim was a youthful-looking man who looked only a year older than Michael despite being in his 20s. He wore what seemed to be a full white rain coat around himself, making him look all the more childish. And even though it looked like Fim's bangs prevented him from looking closely at Bo, he was actually fully aware of what was happening to his surroundings. Any micro-movements that Bo made were visible to him at the moment it happened. His awareness was what helped him achieve the number 2 spot in the Rising 6 ranking, just below Bo. As for Tenzing, his tan skin and his tall and lanky physique may seem like he was frail, but the truth was the exact opposite. When it came to pure strength, even Bo couldn't hold a candle to him. He was ranked 5th in the rankings, above Rena and below Erlos. The whole crowd were beside themselves in anticipation. Everyone expected Bo to win, however. Being cornered by Fim and Tenzing could prove to be her downfall this time around. But as Barnaby and the rest of the crowd looked a little closer at what was going on, they realized that the fight wasn't just starting. It was nearing its end. Fim and Tenzing were already at their limits, with their bodies bloodied and bruised. They were barely even standing up at this point. Compared to them, Bo was still in tip-top condition. She was safe within her army of cake soldiers, with no scratch nor dirt in her pink frilly dress. Fim and Tenzing are working together, but they are still losing against Bo? Wasn't Fim considered just a tad bit below Bo in strength? He almost defeated her last year in the same auction. With Tenzing around, they should have been able to defeat Bo. Does that mean that Bo became even stronger than before? Fim and Tenzing weren't even planning on working together at all. In fact, they were even fighting against each other earlier in the game. But then, they stumbled upon Bo by accident, and what they saw made them immediately team up to try and stop her. Bo, with larger-than-life curled-up blonde hair, arrived with her usual pink and frilly dress that wasn't appropriate in a battle whatsoever. Behind her was a veritable army of animated stuffed toys made out of some kind of cake and frosting material. There were giant teddy bear soldiers, two-legged walking knives made out of real metal, and any other cute but terrifying creations she could muster. That wasn't the reason why Fim and Tenzing wanted to work together. It was what she had on her waist that made them alert in the first place. On her red ribbon belt, there were 5 glowing golden keys dangling at her side. Those were the keys of this game. Her teammates had already gathered all 5 of them. This meant that all she needed to do was to go to the glass dome and claim all 5 drops of Su for herself. Fim and Tenzing only had 2 keys each. It was clear that, as reluctant as they might be, they needed to settle their differences for now and stop Bo from hogging all the drops for herself. "Get out of the way, pretty please," Bo said, tilting her head and acting all cutesy. But of course, Fim and Tenzing didn't fall for her tricks. Fim held his mithril relic sword with trembling hands, revealing a white human-like figure with wings floating above him. That was his diva. Tenzing stabbed the bottom of his spear on the ground, using it to keep himself steady. He revealed a giant snowy mountain on top of him as a diva. "All right, if that's what you're going to do then, I'll just have to force my way there," Bo said, flicking her hair carelessly. "Get them." And with those few words, her army charged towards Fim and Tenzing. One giant pink and white slice of cake charged towards Fim. With his sword at the ready, Fim performed an upward strike that sliced the cake in half. The 2 halves fell lifeless beside Fim. But a moment later, it reanimated itself as 2 individual slices of cake, albeit a smaller one. They then smushed themselves towards Fim, forcing him to the ground. Using his ability, Fim conjured a pillar of light from his hands. He grabbed this light and swung it towards the cake, burning it with intense heat and temperature. Just when Fim thought he'd be able to stand up, more slices of cake charged towards him and smothered him from all sides. As Fim conjured up more beams of light to fight off these slices, they suddenly grabbed a hold of his own beam of light and broke it off in half. One of the cakes grabbed the broken beam of light and started to bend it into its own body, creating a pillar of light resembling a candle. On the other side, Tenzing was facing 4 different teddy bear soldiers, each wearing icing as their armor. As one soldier rushed to puncture him with a large fishbone, Tenzing brought down his spear to the ground, grazing the teddy bear's head by a small margin. At that moment, his ability activated at the moment of contact and an image of a snow mountain appeared on top of the teddy bear. Suddenly, a massive downward force overcame the teddy bear's body and instantly crushed its body, as if the weight of an entire mountain was on its back. He continued to swing his spear towards the other teddy bears that came his way, each ending with the same mountain crushing them in an instant. However, just like with what happened with Fim, Bo's creation suddenly grabbed Tenzing's mountain ability and molded it to fit into their own bodies. Suddenly, each step of the teddy bears created cracks on the ground. This was why Bo was feared as the best magnetic in the Rising 6. Chapter 562, 2 left. What followed after that was a systemic dismantling of Fim and Tenzing, all without Bo moving a single inch. The crowd were completely speechless as to how one-sided the fight became. Everyone thought that Fim would have the best chance of defeating her in the auction. But as it turned out, even with Tenzing helping him, they still weren't able to get a scratch on Bo. By the end, both were completely battered, bruised, and exhausted. No matter what they did, they just couldn't defeat her endless horde of food constructs. Fim and Tenzing had to surrender. They had to watch as Bo walked towards the glass dome, completely unimpeded, and with the golden keys dangling beside her. She'd get all 5 Su-drops for herself. At that moment, they suddenly heard the voice of Barnaby coming out from the heavens above them. Players, with Fim and Tenzing out for the count, there are only 2 players left standing. If you haven't gotten a key as of now, then you'd better make sure that those with the key won't get anywhere near the glass dome. Fim, Tenzing, and even Bo were surprised to hear this announcement from Barnaby. The game had progressed much further than they thought. Usually, there would be 3 or 4 players left by the time that everyone got near the glass dome. But now there's just 2. One of them was Bo, but the other was a complete mystery to them. They had a lot of guesses, with the most obvious answer being Reptar from the Crocodile Leather Company. His diva cultivation was the highest among them, being in the 5th stage, and his ability was also the most destructive and would easily defeat the other players' divas. However, Erlos couldn't be counted out either. The man was smart and could use his skeletal alligator ability with creativity. Bo stopped in her tracks and looked around herself. She was curious to see who would be her last competitor in the game. "Are you going to come out?" Bo asked, her voice echoing through the forest. And just a few seconds later, Fim and Tenzing heard rustling on a bush beside them. Then they saw him float out and into the clearing. It wasn't Reptar, it wasn't Erlos, and it wasn't even Rena. It was Michael, the only odd man out of the group, the only one who wasn't in the ranks of the Rising Six. Surprise and confusion flashed across their faces. They weren't expecting to see him, out of all people, here at this late stage in the game. And right in this moment, Fim and Tenzing's body started to phase in and out of existence. Because they lost and had to surrender against Bo, they were now getting teleported out of the game and back into the auction. A few seconds later, they found themselves back on the stage, with the rest of the crowd applauding them for a good try. Just as they were about to go back into the private suites, they were approached by Reptar and Erlos. "You should come with us to watch the game," Erlos suggested. Because they were all friends, this was a yearly tradition they had after they lost in the auction. They would get together and have a chat about what happened during the game, and discuss who would win the next. "I'll go with you. I'm curious to know how both of you got eliminated out of the game," Fim said, his curious and prying eyes hiding behind his bangs. "Did you both eliminate each other like last time?" Tenzing asked, grabbing Reptar by the shoulders and joking with him. Erlos chuckled. "Not exactly. We'll explain to you when we get to my private suite." As they entered Erlos' room, Fim and Tenzing saw Rena already there, with her eyes completely glued to the pocket dimension below. She was blushing, which was very weird to see since she usually hid her expression behind her veil. "I can't believe that the Reborn kid was the one who is left behind," Tenzing said, sitting down on one of the chairs. "Bo's going to end up with 5 more Su-drops for herself, which just increases the gap between us." Fim agreed with his observation. "It is unfortunate, but from what I can observe, the boy is only in the 4th stage of body formation. He can't even defeat you, Reptar." At this point, both Erlos and Reptar chuckled to themselves with self-deprecating smiles. Actually, it was at that moment that they heard the crowd gasp. They quickly looked towards the pocket dimension and saw that the fight between Michael and Bo had already started. As expected, Bo commanded her hundreds of animated food and pastry to overwhelm Michael with numbers. Giant walking cupcakes threw sharp sprinkles like throwing stars. Tall baguettes slithered through the grass and the trees like snakes, and amorphous rice porridge jumped like slimes towards Michael. "That's where she got us," Fim said. "Her food has leveled up even more than last year. It's much smarter and a lot stronger than before. I think this is where the boys' game will end," Tenzing sighed. But it was at that moment that 8 magic circles appeared above Michael. 8? He must be a really good mystic arts user, Tenzing said with an approving nod. "But it's not enough. She has hundreds while he'll only have." Fim's words were cut off when he saw multiple more light sources spring forth in the forest. Michael continued to conjure up more and more magic circles behind him, each one cycling through 8 different colors that corresponded to different elements. Eventually, the magic circles numbered up to the hundreds. Hundreds at the same time? Does he have an infinite mana source or something? How's he doing that? Meanwhile, Reptar and Urlos were just nodding along as they watched as all kinds of magical animals jumped out of the magic circles. Each one had a specific element that boosted an animal's specific trait. That's what I've been trying to tell you. There's a lot of things you missed seeing, Urlos said. Do you want to know why we got eliminated so early in the game? It's because of him. Those magic animals and his ability defeated us, Reptar admitted. They looked at Urlos and Reptar with disbelief in their eyes, as if they were just waiting for them to say that it was just a joke. I can see him defeating Urlos, no offense. But I can't see him defeating you, Reptar. You're one stage higher than him, Fim argued. Reptar shrugged. Yep, he defeated me fair and square. His ability and his weapon is something to be feared. We couldn't even defeat him when we synergized. This time, Fim and Tenzing couldn't close their jaws shut. They remained stun-locked for a few seconds as they tried to process the information they just heard. You mean to tell me you both fought against him at the same time? Tenzing asked, his eyebrows fused together. Yup. And during that fight you were able to synergize? And you still lost. That's the gist of it. Chapter 563, Animals versus Foods. You know, I've been very curious about you, Bo said to Michael with a smile on her face. How come there's a company that appears out of nowhere and seems to have an unlimited amount of funds? Michael shrugged. Well, here I am.
Bonoded.
Yep, here you are. I've been wanting to meet you and just my luck. You happen to be the last player here in our game. Coincidence? Luck? Or skill? I don't know. You tell me, he said as 8 magic circles appeared behind him, followed by 10 more and 20 more after that. He conjured up as many magic circles as the amount of constructs that Bo had, plus extra. Bo's eyes widened as she saw hundreds of spells being cast at the same time. She didn't even know that people could cast more than 4 spells, let alone hundreds. At that moment, she had her answer. You have an 8-element mastery? Bo shouted out. That's the reason why you survived this long. I'm excited to fight with you. Bo commanded her army of animated food and pastries to march towards Michael. In response, hundreds of animals manifested out of the magic circles and jumped in front of Michael, as if the doors to the famous Noah's Ark had been opened. Animals ranged from predators as large as crocodiles, tigers, and lions, to something as small as a rat, a squirrel, and even a swarm of ants. Each one of them were imbued with the power of a single element that improved a specific trait related to that element. Those with the air element became faster and a lot lighter, those with fire had destructive capabilities enhanced, and so on and so forth. The first line of defense for Bo's army were large slices of loaf bread, which used their own bodies as shields towards the onslaught of the animals. The fastest jaguars, panthers, lions, and cheetahs were the first to charge. The animals lunged towards the slices of bread, using their sharp nails to first cut through the skin, before tackling them to the ground and using their fangs to rip its body apart into pieces. In response, 10 blocks of wool cheese rolled down the grasses and tackled the animals with force and power. The animals recoiled from the pain and forced off their prey. But that wasn't the end. The wheels of cheese suddenly sprayed hot, melted cheese towards the tigers and the jaguars, damaging their magic integrity. The lions were the first to recover. They charged forwards and tried to attack the wheels of cheese. But the wheels moved aside and dodged their attacks. However, this seemed to be all part of their plan as a panther lunged to the side and fused with the lion, creating a combination of fire and lightning mana that created an explosion that destroyed the wheel of cheese. As Fim and Tenzing were watching all of this from above, they were amazed at how Michael seemed to be perfectly matching Bo in terms of her army. Even they couldn't do that. You're right. He does have an 8-element mastery, Fim said, still in disbelief. If it's just a matter of constructs, he can even surpass Bo, Tenzing remarked. And just like they said, Michael continued to conjure up more and more magic circles in the air. As the cupcake warriors and bread shields tore apart the magical animals, Michael continued to replace them at an even faster pace than they were getting destroyed. It was a testament to his skill and his talent that he could even keep up with this expenditure. Does he have an unlimited amount of mana? Meanwhile, the Tower Master and the rest of the wizards also watched Michael's battle with Bo, and couldn't help but commend Michael for his seemingly endless amount of mana. If he's just fighting against other magnetics, then this would be an easy win, the Tower Master muttered.
Unfortunately, Bo's ability perfectly counter Michael's spell.
One of the wizards was clueless. What do you mean? The stronger her opponent, the stronger she becomes, the Tower Master revealed. At that same moment, 5 two-tiered giant frosted cakes moved towards the front line, waddling side to side like penguins. These were Bo's generals, and they were fully decked out in frosted defensive gear as well as their own knives to cut things with. Michael's army of multi-elemental eagles swooped down and tried to claw out huge pieces of cake from the generals. The cakes raised their knives and parried the eagles away with ease. Claws and metals clashed together, creating sparks. And just as the eagles were about to fly up high again and swoop down, they suddenly split in half, with their halved bodies falling lifelessly to the ground. The cakes then picked up the eagles' sliced bodies and attached them to the tops of their heads, making it as their own decoration. And suddenly, the cakes' bodies began to glow with power and magic. A few seconds later, they started levitating off the ground before they finally took off and started flying with speed and precision exactly like an eagle. Do you like it? Bo asked, standing atop her own cupcake general. This is my ability. I'll give you a hint. I can use anything as my ingredient and create an entirely new creation from it. That's her ability? Michael wondered as he watched his own spell just get taken from him. What do you think ChatJK for? From preliminary observations, it seems that Bo has the ability to make an entirely new creation out of anything in the world. And it seems that this creation will obtain any of the power or magic of its ingredients. However, it is still unknown as to why her own creation can use her ability without her input. Michael finally understood why people found Bo so hard to fight with. After all, she could just use magic spells or anything else in the world to power her own creations. If her ability was contingent on the fact that she had to physically be in contact with her new ingredient, then it would be easier to deal with. But the fact that her own creations could pull something out of the world and use it for themselves was what made them so dangerous in the first place. They were basically self-sustaining. As her army continued to defeat enemies, then they would grow more and more even without Bo doing anything at all. And it seemed like his magic animals were the perfect nourishment for Bo's army. Each animal was imbued with pure mana and potent elements. If Bo's army got a hold of them, then they would basically be superpowered creations that couldn't be stopped. And that exact scenario seemed to be occurring at this moment. The flying two-tiered cakes used their newfound powers to smash and destroy the other flying birds and animals in the air. The aerial animals turned into mush as they got bulldozed by the giant cakes in the air. Not only that, but their remains fell down to the ground and got picked up by the bread shields, the cupcake warriors, the soup golems, and the rest of her army. As Bo's creations obtained this new power, the balance of power quickly shifted towards their direction. It wasn't long before hundreds of Michael's magic animals were consumed and turned into an ingredient. You're trying to take my spells away from me? Michael scoffed. My supreme talent says otherwise. Chapter 564. Take back. The crowd could only groan in disappointment once they saw Michael's magic animals become a free-for-all buffet for Bo's constructs. Damn. It's Michael's bad luck that Bo has complete advantage over mystic arts users. Yeah. No matter how powerful or how strong his spells are, they'll just end up as nourishment for those food constructs. That's the nature of abilities. They're the natural enemies of mana. With just one touch from Bo's ability, she can completely take control of Michael's spells as if it were hers. Even the wizards from the magic tower couldn't help but voice out their displeasure at seeing Bo's overpowering ability. This is why I hate abilities. They just don't conform to normal standards. How can it just take control of mana so easily like that? If he knew about Bo's ability from the start, then he could have avoided using magic spells. Alas, it's his first time in this auction, so he was completely clueless. Tower Master, we must speak with Michael soon after this. No doubt that he will be distraught and heartbroken after this loss against Bo. Maybe we can use this opportunity to recruit him to our side. Everyone was already counting the moments when Michael would finally surrender to Bo. After all, his mystic arts talent was completely nullified because of Bo's ability. Any spell he did after this would be futile, and would only empower her constructs further. However, the Tower Master didn't think it was over just yet. While his wizards were already discussing what would happen after this auction, his eyes were still glued onto the pocket dimension. He was looking at Michael, who didn't have a look of defeat and dismay painted on his face. Instead, there was a mysterious smile growing on his mouth, and a few moments later, the anticipated surrender didn't come. Barnaby, why isn't he still being teleported out? He can't be hurt too much. His mystic arts talent is too precious. Maybe you didn't hear him. Barnaby didn't expect people to be this protective of Michael. But his performance against Reptar and Erlos gained him a lot of supportive fans that wouldn't want him to experience any more defeat against Bo. He quickly had to clarify the situation. Ladies and gentlemen, my hands are tied. Michael has no indications of surrendering, he announced, much to the surprise and confusion of the crowd. Your talent in the mystic arts is truly something to behold, Bo praised. My constructs have never been this powerful. Do you have any intention of being one of my crew members? I'll pay you handsomely. She loved the power that the magic animals gave her, so much so that she wanted Michael to be a permanent addition to her company. That way, she'd be able to empower her constructs just like today. But of course, Michael had no intention of being under her employ. What makes you think this is over? He said to her. Bo narrowed her eyes and saw Michael spreading his arms wide. She didn't know what he was doing, but she immediately felt a change in the atmosphere. There was something gathering towards Michael, but she just didn't know what. And just as she was about to command one of her cupcake warriors to check him out, she suddenly realized that something was happening with her constructs. Her generals, the flying two-tiered cakes, were vibrating as they floated in the air. They weren't doing this out of their own accord. She wasn't commanding them to do this. Her constructs should be under her complete control, and she should be able to control it just as well as her own body. As she looked around, she realized that it wasn't just her general cakes who were experiencing this weird vibration. It was her entire food army. Each one of them were jittering uncontrollably, which was only getting more and more intense as the seconds passed by. Alarmed, Bo commanded them to return towards her. But it was at this point that her entire army felt a force pulling them away from her. The crusts of the bread shields started to tear away and sucked forwards. The sprinkles on the cupcakes were emerging from icing and shooting out. Even the soup golems were being slowly whittled down as drops were getting sucked in. Everything and anything was shooting towards one specific direction, Michael. Bo was at a complete loss as she saw everything unfold, yet unable to do anything about it. Suddenly, a literal line of water mana shot out from one of the bread shields and started to revolve towards Michael as if he was the sun of a solar system. Soon after that, more and more pure blobs of mana started to emerge from Bo's constructs and began to return back into Michael's control. Her two-tiered cake generals tried hard to contain the magic eagles that it consumed, but eventually, air mana in the form of a winged creature burst out of the cake's body and flew back towards Michael. One by one, Bo's constructs started to lose the very magic that they gained from consuming Michael's spells. Lightning started to leave her baguette soldiers. Fire was extinguished from her biscuits, and her tarts started to lose the poison in their fillings. This can't be. She knew what was happening, yet she couldn't understand why it was happening. This was supposed to be impossible. Those magic spells were consumed by her ability, meaning that it worked under the power of her own diva. No magic spell could take it back. No matter how talented Michael was in the mystic arts, no matter how many elements he mastered, it still wouldn't change the fact that they were coated with her ability. She knew that this wasn't Michael's ability because his diva hadn't shown up yet once during this fight, and he wasn't using it now. In fact, it didn't even look like he was using a magic spell to take back his mana. It looked like he was just opening his arms to welcome them home. What is happening? Even the other experts in magnetics and diva were perplexed. They knew more than others, and they knew that Michael's diva had something to do with freezing time or momentum. It didn't have something to do about returning magic or mana. Yet somehow, he was able to overpower Bo's ability and forcefully take back his own magic spells like it was nothing. Even if he used an ability, that still wouldn't make sense. She was in the 6th stage while he was still in the 4th stage. The difference was too huge. Tower Master, do you know any kind of magic that can bypass an ability? Is he using a 9-star spell? No one could answer the questions. The Tower Master remained silent and continued to look at Michael. It wasn't as if he had absolutely no clue about what was happening. He knew that there could only be one explanation for this, but it would be far too surprising to even mutter out loud. Could it be? Meanwhile, the Duchess couldn't help but get out of her seat and stare at Michael with wonder in her eyes. Ha ha ha! I knew it! He has a supreme talent. Chapter 565. Frankenstein Chef. It had been well documented that anyone who possessed a supreme talent ended up becoming powerful enough to influence the world. Examples included the Ocean King, the Draconic Queen, and the Celestial Elf. They all had a supreme talent, and ended up leading the entirety of their species to undergo a metamorphosis, becoming a global power in the world. There hadn't been a human who possessed a supreme talent. Until now. Until Michael arrived. The more she thought about it, the more obvious it became. Of course he had a supreme talent. It would explain so much how a boy like him could have these amazing powers that nobody else even thought was possible. He was talented in the mystic arts, he was a natural magnetic, and he had an amazing intellect for innovation as well. All of those pointed towards a talent unlike anyone had ever seen before. His supreme talent must have something to do with mana and magic, the Duchess deduced. His 8-element mastery and his uncanny ability to produce any and all kinds of spells out of the blue was proof of that. And the fact that he could control the mana on Bo's creatures despite her ability was the final evidence she needed to confirm her hypothesis. The Duchess couldn't contain her excitement. She was even more sure of her decision to support Michael during these early stages. She was grateful that she established her relationship with him before he truly exploded out into the global scene. I knew my instincts weren't wrong. Siding with him will be the best decision of my life, the Duchess declared. Having a supreme talent was a great indication of the potential Michael had down the road. His strength, his intellect, and especially his diva, would prove themselves to be better than the rest, all because of his supreme talent. Bo was helpless as she saw mana blobs exploding out of her creations and returning to Michael's side. Her bread shields, her cupcake warriors, and the rest of the pastry battalion were all incurring exploding wounds as the mana burst out of their bodies trying to get to Michael. Finally, as the last mote of mana returned to Michael's side, her creations officially lost all of the powers they gained, and even got destroyed in the process. All of the pastry and food soldiers fell down on the ground, lifeless. I know what your ability is now, Michael said to Bo. I know how you're able to spread your powers to your creations. Thanks to her consumption of his spells, he was able to get a first-hand look on what was going on inside her creations. And what he found gave him a clue as to how her ability worked, and how she was able to make herself as powerful as she was now. You put a piece of yourself in every creation. Hearing those words come out of him caught Bo off guard. She had met other magnetics who were able to subdue her creations. She even met others who were able to defeat it. But she had never met anyone who was able to discover the mystery to her powers. You said that you can use anything as an ingredient for your creations. That means that you can also use yourself. That's how each of your creations can use the same ability as you. Since her creations can get the power of the ingredient needed to create it, then by imparting part of her own body, her own soul towards her creation, then it would also be able to use her ability. But the downside of this is that once they're injured, you're injured too. Michael noticed that the light mana signature in Bo's body was a lot smaller than he anticipated. But once he realized that those light mana were instead imparted into her creations, everything made sense. Bo couldn't help but applaud Michael for his observational skills. "You're right," she admitted. "I used part of myself to create these constructs." She then reached behind her back to show a carving knife, perfect for slicing meats, among other things. After all, this knife wasn't just a chef's tool, but it was also a pristine mithril relic that gave Bo the power to become a chef that can cook the natural world. Just as her knife glowed with a red light, a figure shimmered above her. It was a humanoid woman, with stitches going all around its face and everywhere around its body. Its skin wasn't human, and it differed with each patch that was stitched to make up its whole face. Some of it was made out of bread, some made out of frosting, and some made out of jelly. The best way to describe this diva was if it was a Frankenstein's monster where the dead parts came from food and pastries. It wore a white apron that covered most of its body, and a tall white, pleated hat on its head that only certified chefs and cooks could wear. Bo licked her cleaver knife before smiling at Michael. She raised her weapon high up in the air, with her Frankenstein chef diva mimicking her movements. And suddenly, all the corpses of her destroyed food and pastry creations started to float up towards them. Crumbs of destroyed cakes, the sprinkle-like decorations in the ground, and even spilled porridge soup from the soup golems were being recalled back towards Bo's side. Michael thought she was going to recreate her army, but instead, she started to gather all the pieces of her army into one giant ball and amalgamation of everything she created. As she gathered more and more crumbs, the ball became as big as a giant boulder that towered over the tallest trees of the pocket dimension. And it didn't seem like it would end there. At its final shape, it reached a height of about 20 meters in total, or as high as a 5-story house. Once everything had gathered, the Frankenstein chef diva above Bo started to get to work. It moved its hands, showing it to be holding a knife and a flat pan in its hands, and started to cook an invisible food in an invisible stove. Suddenly, the large sphere of what could only be described as leftover food started to mold and form into the likeness of a 4-legged monster resembling a gigantic bear. It looked just like Bo's diva, with its body looking like it had been stitched together from parts of different foods and pastries. But make no mistake, its power and ferality made it the monster it was supposed to be. Once the cooking process had finished, the bear stood up on its hind legs and let out a guttural scream, with the spikes on its back opening up like it was its defensive mechanism. Once the crowd saw this monster, they immediately recognized where Bo got inspiration from it. "That's the 8-star monster Ursa Grizzla. I did see her sneak up on the Ursa Grizzla earlier in the game. She probably got a piece of it and is now using it to build her own 8-star monster. I can't believe that she still won't lose." Michael was even able to destroy her entire army with his strange mana retrieval. Of course, everyone was seeing an 8-star monster. But for Michael, he was seeing a completely different thing. He was seeing a very large target that couldn't dodge even if it wanted to. And this target just so happened to contain pieces of Bo's light mana inside it. Chapter 566, 2 Beams, Right Timing. The Frankenstein Ursa Grizzla huffed towards Michael and got up on its hind legs as it tried to show its dominance. It raised one hand and swiped down towards Michael. Even though he was far away from it, the mere force and power from the Ursa Grizzla had shockwave of power that created a giant crevasse in the ground from where it swiped its hands. Hundreds of trees were destroyed in an instant, disturbing the natural habitats of wildlife in the pocket dimension. Michael reappeared just a second later, having used his shadow clone to avoid the Ursa Grizzla's attack. But just as he appeared atop a tree, the Ursa Grizzla suddenly reappeared in front of him, with its giant paws just a few meters away from his face. Michael raised his hand with multiple layers of rock shields manifested at the same time. As the monster's paws hit his defenses, pure earth mana turned into dust and powder from the force. Tens of his shields were broken in an instant before its claws hit his absolute unity defense. The Ursa Grizzla's eyes widened as if felt resistance for the first time. Michael's unity defense allowed him enough time to teleport out into safety. Even Bo was surprised. She felt the monster's paws get burned after hitting Michael's invisible shield, which was supposed to have crumbled under the weight and power of an 8-star monster. While they were stunned, Michael finally took this chance to raise his hand towards the Ursa Grizzla, with his finger glowing as it gathered the power of unity in a single point. Bo finally noticed what he was doing after seeing the bright white light in the corner of her eyes. But it was already too late. The unity gun fired off towards the Ursa Grizzla, hitting it directly in the chest, making it recoil backwards from the pain. "What?" she shouted in confusion. She tried to use her ability to regenerate the wounds that it had incurred from that strange white beam, but she was surprised to find out that the wound wasn't healing at all. The damage seemed to be permanent. Not only that, but she felt a pain in her chest akin to having a needle poked through her ribs. Michael had somehow picked the perfect spot where her soul was mixed into the monster. How? And before she could try and process what had happened, she saw Michael's hand flash with that same bright white light again. Aware of the power from that beam, Bo quickly sliced her knife towards the Ursa Grizzla. Suddenly, the Ursa Grizzla split in half, allowing Michael's unity beam to pass through where it had broken off. And just when she was going to repair her monster into one piece again, Michael's hands once again glowed with the power of unity. "What is that power?" she asked him. Bo quickly sliced the air 5 more times, allowing the Ursa Grizzla to separate into its limbs. Its head, its body, and its 4 limbs floated separately in the air. All of its parts began to separate into different directions, intending to surround Michael from all sides and prevent him from shooting that powerful beam again. One of the Ursa Grizzla's arms shot towards Michael like a rocket. Meanwhile, its body moved towards Michael's back, giving him no chance to escape. But instead of panicking, Michael carefully aimed his unity gun towards one of the idling forelimbs of the monster. His unity beam shot off at the same moment that the Ursa Grizzla's arm shot towards him. But with the near instantaneous speed of the unity beam, it beat out the arm by a large margin. As soon as the shot landed, Bo felt an insane amount of pain in her chest, so much so that her concentration on the Ursa Grizzla faltered for a little bit, causing them to malfunction and miss its target. KAGH. Somehow, Michael picked the exact spot where her light mana was hidden again. This is not a coincidence, she gravely realized. Now, her attention was solely focused on Michael's hands. If it so much as glowed, then she would rush towards him and give him no chance to power up another one of his destructive beams. She went towards a tree and performed 10 slices in a second. Suddenly, its trunk and the majority of its branches were trimmed off until the shape of an arrow was left behind. And finally, she tapped her cleaver knife into her own chest and sliced out a thin piece of her own soul. This mode of light mana then moved towards the giant arrow, imbuing it with life and animation as if it was a real monster. Just then, Michael's finger glowed as he aimed it towards the Ursa Grizzla's head. Bo launched the giant tree arrow towards him at speeds as fast as an arrow, but as large and as powerful as a tree. Michael had to stop his unity gun for a second as he teleported himself out and into safety. He reappeared back down on the ground, away from the Ursa Grizzla. However, the monster's senses seemed to be finely tuned into his scent as it immediately turned and rushed towards him, giving him no time to fire off another shot of unity gun. Bo had successfully prevented that bright beam from hitting. But unbeknownst to her, there was a metallic object just waiting behind her. Bzzzzzzz. And before she knew it, a unity beam had pierced through her back and into her chest. The Godforge pieces in her heart created a shield that protected her vital organ from being instantly destroyed, but the rest of the wound was still suffering from major burns. Arg! What? Where? Bo looked around, only to see a strange metallic object floating just underneath the crown of a tree. And before she could try and understand what was happening, another unity gun shot off and hit her in the stomach. Michael used his chance well, hitting her 2 times in the span of a few seconds. This was the reason why he had kept the drone's existence a secret throughout this fight. He had been waiting for the right moment, when all of her focus was occupied with him and nothing else. And it worked, much to the surprise of the crowd and everyone else. He actually injured Bo. He did it. What is that beam anyway? How is it able to go through her defenses and pierce through her ability? I'm more interested in his mithril weapon. How is he able to perform the same power as him? Fim and Tenzing were the one most surprised. They never even injured Bo at least once during this auction. And now, it seemed like Michael was in a complete advantage over her. That weapon of his is a dangerous combination, Reptar said, drawing from his own experience. It's a mithril artifact with abilities unlike any other. After hearing and seeing everything Michael was capable of, Fim and Tenzing were starting to believe that Michael actually had a chance to defeat Bo. If his chances were at 0% at the start of this, then now it was at a whopping 25%. Chapter 567. The Gathering. Okay, I just need to continue hitting her with the Unity gun, and her light mana will slowly dwindle. Michael's plan of attack was simple. Use Bo's own ability against her. Since she needed to implement a part of her soul into her creations, this meant that she'd have to juggle between protecting herself or her constructs. And with the drone stalking in the sidelines and ready to strike, he would be able to slowly whittle down her defenses. This was the only path he could see. After all, he knew that her 6th-stage diva cultivation was something that he couldn't fight against head-on. He raised his hand, his finger glowing brighter and brighter as he began to concentrate Unity into a small space. Bo, still bleeding, used her cleaver knife to slice off a piece of bark from a tree and paste it onto herself. Soon, the bark became part of her own body, patching up the 2 gunshots she received. She looked up at Michael and commended his power. Your mysterious powers and your flying weapon is praiseworthy. But it's not going to be enough to defeat me, she declared proudly. Just then, the giant Ursa Grizzla raised its porridge soup snout high up in the air and bellowed a roar, creating a shockwave that propagated throughout the entire pocket dimension. And in just a few seconds, the ground suddenly shook. Michael looked around, wondering if it was simply an earthquake that was causing the tremors. But as he felt it beneath his feet, he realized that the shaking was irregular and non-uniform. It reminded him of when he was at a concert and thousands of people were jumping chaotically to the sound of the music. Don't tell me. His eyes widened as he used his supreme talent to peer through his surroundings, looking for signs of any light mana in the area. In the near distance, he saw it. He saw them. Hundreds of monsters, big, small, and gigantic, were running towards their direction with nothing but crazed purpose in their eyes. Once he looked at their body language, he realized that they were looking towards the Ursa Grizzla, as if they were being called by the monster. Okay, hundreds of monsters, but they're just in the 4-star to 5-star range. I can deal with that, he thought. He was about to conjure up more magic animals in the air, when all of a sudden, an even bigger tremor erupted from the ground. The force was almost enough to make him trip and lose his balance. This time, he didn't have to use his supreme talent to know what was happening. Beyond the trees, he saw colossal beasts similar to ancient dinosaurs rampage through the forest. These monsters didn't just smash their way through the trees. They also demolished and feasted on the smaller and weaker monsters gathering around them. The crowd above were just as flustered as Michael. They didn't think Bo would be crazy enough to summon the entirety of the monsters in the pocket dimension. Why did she do this when they're so close to the glass dome? Didn't she know that the 8-star monsters resided surrounding it? Now all of them are converging on their location. Maybe that's her plan. She's using those monsters to mess with Michael. It makes sense. Although that white beam of his is powerful, it can only be fired once every few seconds at most. And even if he has that mithril weapon, he won't be able to defend against tens of 8-star monsters coming his way. As expected of Bo, she immediately thought of a way to counteract Michael's advantages. Michael won't be able to fire his Unity gun towards her if he was busy getting chased by beasts from all directions. And although she won't be exempted from the beasts, she could use her ability to protect herself and even use the monsters to her advantage. One dog-like monster with a very defined bone structure skidded on the ground as it reached Michael's location. It opened its mouth sideways, uttering out a shrilling sound and revealing thousands of teeth around its mouth. Michael immediately used an air jet on the soles of his feet, taking off away from the dog monster. And just as he did that, its body disappeared and reappeared right from where Michael was standing, with its mouth open and just a few inches away from taking a bite out of him. Before he could even take a break, another gigantic monster that looked like a black rooster with a T-Rex head appeared behind him. It pecked towards him with speeds almost enough to break the sound barrier. His absolute unity defense activated, resisting against the 8-star monster's beak for a brief moment and giving him the chance to teleport out into safety. I'm completely surrounded, he realized. All around him were 8-star monsters that were hungry to get a taste of him. Although on the bright side, Bo was also occupied with her own group of 8-star monsters, needing to jump atop her Ursa Grizzla and command it to protect her from the beasts. Just then, 2 of the gorilla-like 8-star colossal monsters jumped up and tried to grab him from the air. He raised his Unity gun and aimed it at them, with the drone floating opposite him and targeting the other. As his shot powered up, the beasts seemed to have felt the power of his Unity. Their instincts kicked in and they immediately used each other as a platform and jumped sideways, out of harm's way. His shot missed, hitting nothing but the ground. They're a lot faster than me, so they can easily dodge it. The solution to that was simple. Just pause them. The dog monster lunged at him with its mouth wide open, with its intelligence high enough to know that his Unity gun was still on cooldown. He reached down his pockets and threw the switch onto the monster's perked-up ears. As soon as it latched onto its skin, the beast paused in midair as if its time had completely stopped. The tip of his finger finally glowed with the power of Unity. The beast was eventually able to wrestle control back on its body. But it was too late. The Unity gun shot directly towards its head, burning through its thick skull. The dog monster fell to the ground, its limbs shaking. But it was resilient. Michael saw that its light mana had only depleted by a quarter, meaning that he had to shoot it 3 more times to truly incapacitate it for good. And if he was just fighting a single monster, then it was easy. But unfortunately, the 5 other 8-star monsters wouldn't give him that chance. They were smart, and they knew that they couldn't let him solo them individually. They lunged towards him, all coming from different directions. Their eyes were wary of the Unity gun and the switch he used to injure the dog monster. He tried to move out of the way, but they were way too fast. Their rabid mouths and sharp claws converged towards him, with the only thing defending him was his Unity shield. Chapter 568, 8-Star Monsters. His absolute Unity shield popped for the first time as it took on the combined forces of 5 8-star monsters. Still, it gave enough of a deterrent for Michael to teleport down into the ground, using the cover of the thick leaves of the trees to hide himself from the monsters. Fighting them one by one is almost impossible. I have to take them out at the same time. The only thing that could create enough damage towards the monsters in one big explosion was none other than the Unity grenade from his drone. But he had to be careful about how he used this. First of all, launching the Unity grenade was very slow, unlike the Unity gun, and even that was being dodged by the 8-star monsters. And secondly, knowing how intelligent those monsters were, he knew that he only had one shot at this. Once they knew about its destructive prowess, he wouldn't be able to use it again without them escaping before he could set it up. After thinking about it some more, a plan finally took shape in his mind. And just in time too, as the monsters finally turned their heads towards him. They pounced at him as if he was a mouse let loose in the forest. But unbeknownst to them, a drone was hovering above them. They were so concentrated on Michael that they neglected to look at the puny drone. Just as all 6 8-star colossal beasts, including the injured dog monster, rushed towards Michael, the drone opened its underside. Suddenly, 6 iron switches were released down into their paths, each hitting an unsuspecting beast on their humongous bodies. In a single moment, all 8-star monsters paused into a small cluster. And soon after that, the drone unveiled its giant barrel from its frame and aimed down at the center of the monster's cluster. With a single thought, Michael released the Unity grenade into the center. The ball of pure Unity fell gracefully into the ground, with the beasts around it still frozen solid from the ability switches. It was in that instant that Bo suddenly felt her hairs stand on end. She didn't have to know what was happening to know that something dangerous was about to come. She immediately used her Ursa Grizzla to get away from Michael as far as possible. But they couldn't have moved too far as the grenade finally touched down into the ground. At the moment of contact, a bright white light bursted out into a dome which grew larger and larger near the speed of light. It wasn't long before anything and everything around the pocket dimension was blinded from the explosion. But this grenade wasn't just a flashbang. Soon after the burst of light, the concentration of extreme energy in the Unity grenade exploded out into cataclysmic proportions, destroying a large portion of the ground and reducing it into a giant crater. A shockwave soon followed, creating a furious wind that uprooted trees and lifted large boulders from the ground. Beau's Ursa Grizzla was toppled into the ground, before skidding uncontrollably outwards just from the force of the blast. A few seconds later, the shockwave subsided, leaving the entire pocket dimension as silent as the night. Beau peeked out of the Ursa Grizzla's head and saw the magnitude of destruction that the grenade had caused. Everything was in chaos, with all the trees in a wide radius around the blast having been toppled to the ground. As for the 5/8 star monsters that were coming towards Michael, one was reduced into nothingness, while the other 4 were injured beyond repair. Their tough bodies and resilient skin were burned into a black crisp. They were dead on the spot after feeling the ravaging effects of Unity destroy their bodies. Somehow, Michael was able to kill 8-star monsters within one fell swoop. How is this possible? Even the crowd watching from above were shocked. At first, they thought that this was where Michael's journey would end. Being surrounded by 5 8-star monsters could be considered a death sentence in this game. But in a complete upset, Michael used his flying weapon again to change the tides of the battle. They thought they knew the capabilities of Michael's mithril weapon, with it being able to use the same powerful beam as he could. But as it turned out, it was hiding an even more destructive power. The wizards from the magic tower were unable to contain their curiosity. They were scholars. They were dying to figure out the mystery behind Michael's weapon and his power. They wanted to go down into the pocket dimension and personally ask him to explain how it worked. Seriously, what is that flying weapon of his? How could such a small weapon even conjure up an explosion of that power? The size of its blast should only be equal to a 6-star spell, so the 8-star monsters should theoretically be able to survive it without a single scratch. From their expert opinion, the monsters would only incur fatal injuries if the explosion was big enough to destroy the whole pocket dimension. But their surprise didn't end there. Someone with a high sensitivity to mana realized what had happened to the area of the blast in the aftermath. "There's no mana," he exclaimed. "The explosion created a void of space where there's no mana at all." All the wizards and mages gasped. It was like they were seeing their nightmare in person. Having no access to mana would be like having no air to breathe. It was their greatest fear. How is this even possible? How can a spell made out of mana create a mana-less zone? Thankfully, there was someone here who had a clue as to how it was possible. "It's made out of the same power as that beam. It contains all 8 elements," he muttered. "If that beam focused on penetration power, this explosion focused on destructive power. And that power was able to destroy the natural defenses of the 8-star monsters. Not only that, but the explosion was so strong that it basically annihilated all the surrounding mana in the air as well. I'm guessing that mana wouldn't be replenished in that area for some time." All the wizards and mages in their room gulped. After learning this, they wouldn't dare fight Michael one-on-one. Michael floated up, overlooking the crater he had created. Though he failed to reduce the monsters down into their very last atom, he still eliminated them in the end. Just then, out of the corner of his eyes, he saw the colossal Ursa Grizzla charging at him on all 4 limbs. He quickly turned his aim towards it, shooting it in the head and destroying a small bit of Beau's light mana inside it. His drone also reloaded its Unity gun, ready to shoot the charging bear. This was the only monster he had to worry about. Meanwhile, Beau was still dealing with her own group of 8-star monsters. But as he reloaded his Unity gun, he realized that Beau was nowhere to be seen. He looked around, only to see her attacking the 6 remaining 8-star monsters on her side. Above her was her Frankenstein chef diva, ready to cook.
Chapter 569, Beau's Monsters.
Beau faced 6 8-star monsters with nothing but her frilly pink dress and her mithril relic cleaver knife. One of the elephant monsters with spiraling tusks charged towards her. But instead of running away, she faced the attack with just a simple slice from her weapon. Such a small gesture should have been useless against a behemoth like this monster. However, above Bo was her Frankenstein chef diva, who was moving the knife and the flat pan around as if it was mimicking a real chef. As Bo's knife met with the elephant monster's tusks, her knife easily sliced through the bone as if it was butter. The slice continued to penetrate through the tusk and towards the very elephant itself. The durability and defense of an 8-star monster was nothing when faced against an ability. Bo's knife sliced through the elephant horizontally, separating its legs from its body. But strangely enough, the monster didn't die nor did it look injured. That wasn't her goal after all. She simply needed a way to get inside. She tapped her knife to her own chest, taking out a piece of visible light mana from her own soul and flicking it towards the slit on the elephant's body. As soon as the mote of mana entered the elephant's body, a huge change occurred within the beast. Its eyes trembled, forcing the monster to blink. And once it opened its eyes, it had suddenly transformed into a piece of frosting. More and more parts of the elephant's body continued to morph and change shape, becoming a crude stitching of different pastries and foods. It had become like the Frankenstein chef diva. She had turned the 8-star monster into her own creation, giving her full control over it. And this wasn't the only one. The other 5 monsters were already turning into monsters made out of bread, cream, and sugar. This was how she got her army in the first place. She used the beasts and monsters inhabiting the pocket dimension and used their bodies to create constructs under her control. And it looked like this time she was going to get the strongest monsters on her side. A total of 6 8-star monsters became completely subservient to Bo. I would have had more constructs, but I didn't expect you to kill all 5 of them before I could get them under my control, Bo said to Michael as the elephant monster used its trunks to get her on top of it. Now I see why everyone considers her as the strongest rising 6. She's practically unbeatable. He used his unity gun to shoot at the elephant monster's head since it was the slowest. But even so, it ducked under his shot and charged at him with tusks made out of frosting. He reached down his pockets, taking out an iron switch and placing it squarely on his palms. At this point, Bo knew about his switch. So, speed was the only way he was going to hit the monster. He conjured up a magic circle and created a spell unlike anyone had ever seen before. A solid earth chunk manifested in the air, which suddenly burst into flames as he injected fire mana into it. The chunk immediately glowed red hot as it got heated up into 1,000 degrees Celsius. Eventually, it turned into a malleable liquid material which got telepathically molded into the shape and mechanics of something he saw from his previous life. The liquid morphed into an open cylindrical shell with the same diameter as his switch. Anyone from Earth would immediately recognize it as a weapon meant for wars. It was a cannon. He loaded up one of the switches onto the barrel and injected it with the 4 basic mana elements: lightning, poison, dark, and light. The combination created a miniature explosion that launched the switch towards the elephant monster. Its speed was a surprise for all people, including Bo, so it successfully attached itself towards the monster's head. The 8-star beast stopped in place for a moment, giving Michael a chance to escape from its charge. He teleported out and charged up his unity gun, pointing it at its body. However, just a millisecond later, the switch popped out of the elephant's forehead and fell to the ground. His switch could only stop it by a very brief instance. Damn. That's the difference between 4th stage and 6th stage. Because those beasts were now under Bo's control, they were imbued with her own ability. And despite his unusually strong diva power, there was a limit as to who he could defeat. But even though he was disappointed with the results, Bo couldn't help but widen her eyes as she saw her control over the monster stop for a brief moment. How? He's just in the 4th stage of body formation. His ability shouldn't even work on her. Period. Yet it did. It was only for a few milliseconds, but it still overpowered it regardless. She was forced to consider Michael with a lot more cautiousness than before. She raised her cleaver knife in the air and commanded all 6 8-star monsters to bombard Michi with their strongest attacks. A sense of foreboding caused her to hurry. She wanted to defeat Michael before something bad happened. The monsters attacked Michael with coordination and synchronization, making them a lot more dangerous than the other beasts he encountered. With Bo at the helm, they strategically hunted Michael down and gave him no chance to escape. As soon as he tried to teleport out with his shadow ability, there would be a panther monster lurking in the forest ready to strike at him whenever he reappeared. Even his drone was getting hunted. The colossal wasp monster used its giant stingers made out of frosting to hunt the drone and prevent it from using its Unity gun. And since he was controlling the drone manually with his supreme talent, he had to balance his own well-being with his drones at the same time. This can't go on any longer, he thought as he conjured a lava wall to separate himself from the elephant monster's tusks. If I want to defeat Bo, I need to isolate her from her constructs. The best way to do that was to kill them. Unfortunately, his Unity gun was not meant for an area of effect. Meanwhile, his grenade was still on cooldown, and no matter how many switches he threw at them, they only stopped for a millisecond at most. His abilities were useless against someone stronger than him. But at this moment, an idea popped into his head. What if I use my switches on me? ChatJK4, is it possible? Your idea has merit. Would you like me to formulate a plan on how to best use it to isolate Bo? He didn't even have to reply as ChatJK4 laid out an extensive plan in his mind. He just had to follow them to the T. First, he raised his hand and used his Unity gun. A bright blinding light appeared on the tip of his fingers, alerting Bo and her monsters about his impending attack. They quickly went on the defensive, putting some distance away from him. But as the Unity gun reached its peak and shot off, the light suddenly died down, with no white beam coming out of his finger. Everyone thought he missed or he made an error. But unbeknownst to them, his target wasn't Bo or her beast. It was a switch. Chapter 570, Missing Shots. And for the next minute, Michael continued missing his shots. He must have done this no less than 20 times in total. Each time, his finger would glow with an intense light, reaching a peak before eventually dying down, as if he had just fired off his Unity gun. But strangely enough, there was no beam that fired off. Everyone was perplexed with this uncharacteristic error from Michael. They could have understood it if it happened only once or twice. Even the best made mistakes. But this was the 20th time in a row. Bo, on the other hand, was starting to get suspicious. She didn't know what he was planning, but she didn't like it one bit. She commanded her beasts to hunt him down with even more intensity. Michael activated his Unity gun, for one last time, with a switch secretly blocking the tip of his finger. Using this opportunity, the jaguar monster leaped up from beneath the trees and tried to claw at him from both sides. But the drone suddenly put itself in between them and fought against the jaguar's frosted claws. Sparks flew off from the point of contact. The drone eventually got overpowered by the monster's immense power, being thrown down into the ground with force. It landed on the forest floor, creating a 2-feet-deep crater around it. For a moment, Bo thought she'd finally destroyed the drone. But a few seconds later, its propellers buzzed into life and soared into the skies. Even with the power of an 8-star monster powered by an ability, Michael's drone received no scratch at all. This weapon is not simple, she guessed. Its mysterious origin and its unbelievable durability made Bo focused on the drone entirely. She knew Michael's limits, but she didn't know anything about the drone. In her mind, it was the only thing that could change the tides of the battle. Once she incapacitated it, the fight would soon be over. With Michael still occupied with the monsters, she jumped up from the elephant's head and pursued the drone. Mithril relic cleaver knife in hand, she sliced it down towards the drone to split it down the middle. She wanted to see if it could become one of her ingredients. But just as her knife was about to make contact with its frame, a gaseous shadow suddenly emerged from its edges and quickly enveloped its entirety. Not even a second later, the shadows morphed into something bigger. It molded itself to become the shape of a human, into Michael's body. He emerged from the shadows, becoming face to face with Bo with barely a meter in front of them. She quickly reversed her momentum, backing away from him. Her monsters quickly turned around and charged after him. But in that moment, he reached down his pockets and spread his prepared switches into the air around them. Using telekinesis, the switches flew to their correct positions in the air and floated in place. Bo looked around and found herself surrounded by a strategic placement of switches. They lined themselves up into a rigid structure. With just a meter in between switches, they formed a cube. Bo didn't like where this was going. For some reason, she felt enclosed, as if the walls were closing in on her. But before she could escape, Michael raised his hand and snapped his finger, and immediately the switches flicked into the on position. A bright white light emerged from every single switch in the air. They increased in intensity before shooting off a beam of pure energy outwards. Some beams shot horizontally while the others shot vertically. Eventually, they all intersected with one another and created a cubed cage structure using unity beams as his frame. The switches were strategically placed to create a crisscross of unity beams that only very tiny creatures could pass through. This was why he had been shooting off his unity guns at the switch. He was turning them off at the moment it shot towards the switch, preserving a tiny bit of its power. Once it was turned on, the beam would continue to transmit its power in a straight line. And since it was attached to a switch, the beam would continue to be a solid pillar for as long as he had it turned to the on position. With this, he created a cage made out of pure unity. Bo's monsters uttered a guttural roar as they saw their creator boxed in with Michael. The elephant monster trumpeted its trunk before charging towards the cage, its frosted trunks ready to tear it to pieces. But as soon as the elephant's tusk made contact with the unity cage, it immediately roared and recoiled in pain. It backed away and looked at its own tusk. What used to be a long, coiled horn now became just a small stump on the front of its mouth. The tusks were immediately burned into nothingness just from a brief exposure to the unity cage. Touching the unity bars was like being hit with a unity gun. For an extended period of time, it destroyed anything and everything. The elephant monster warily looked at the cage, with the other beasts also following its lead. They were far too big to get inside it, meaning the battle was now just between Michael and Bo. The crowd were incredibly amazed to see this. Somehow, Michael was once again able to flip the situation entirely on its head and gain the upper hand. So that's what he'd been doing this entire time. No wonder those light beams weren't hitting anything. That's a very smart use of his own power and abilities. Bo is completely isolated for the first time. And look at that. His flying weapon fits perfectly in the holes, meaning he can use it to fight against her. Even Bo had to give Michael his due credit. She couldn't help but become more and more interested in Michael as she learned more about him. "You are amazing, you know that?" Bo asked, twirling her blonde hair. "You're the first one to corner me like this." Michael smiled. "I'm honored. Can I also be the first one to defeat you?" Bo hid her chuckle with her hands. "Maybe, but trapping me in here doesn't mean that you defeated me. It just means we'll have to be a little bit handsy with each other." He ignored her innuendo and raised his unity gun towards her. In response, she took out her cleaver knife and twirled it around her hand. The figure of the Frankenstein chef diva appeared above her, ready to cook her next meal. He manifested his own diva, showing the two complete futuristic mechanical floating arms in the air. She looked at his diva and was even more impressed. "Already in the 4th stage, yet you have only manifested your diva's arms? Is that bad?" he asked her. "Bad? No, it just means that your diva has a lot left to grow. The slower a diva matures, the stronger they become in the future," she said with a smile. "Just a little bit of advice. You should continue fighting with your diva more. It will help you grow faster."